We're live. Okay. All right, folks. Welcome to Laramie. Seeing a lot of familiar faces in here. Obviously, you've been here, and we're certainly glad you're back. Welcome to our last scheduled meeting of the Select Committee. I think we've had a good interim. We've got a good agenda. Mr. Co-Chairman and I have put in a good amount of work for this agenda, and I think it's some good discussion. Couple of house cleaning items. I'm supposed to give you this long speech about the LSO told me to say about, but basically just behave yourselves, be nice, direct everything through the chair. It's just legislative protocol. So if you have questions or comments, please direct them through myself or through my co-chairman, Senator Rothfuss. But yeah, be nice or leave. That's kind of how we like to do it, I think. Before we get too far into this, we should probably do the roll call.
Let's do a roll call.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. This is roll call for the Select Committee on Blockchain for September 16th. Senator Ellis.
Excused.
Senator Furphy.
Here.
Senator Nethercott.
Here.
She is here. Okay.
Representative Andrew. Representative Singh.
Here.
Representative Yin.
Here.
Mr. Kaufman.
Here.
Mr. Pope.
Here.
Mr. Revel.
Here.
Co-Chairman Rothfuss.
Here.
Chairman Western.
Present.
You have a quorum.
Excellent. Okay. Well, Mr. Co-Chairman, am I missing any introductory remarks? Is there anything you'd like to add?
No, Mr. Co-Chairman, we do need to approve minutes. We missed some previous minutes, so I think we've got those in our packets. That's one thing that we'll do ahead of getting to our general updates. But I did just want to welcome everyone to Laramie. Appreciate once again having the meeting here. We'll hear a little bit about the blockchain stampede coming up in our general updates. So I know we've got a lot of folks here for that, and we appreciate having that once again this year. But look forward to a good meeting, Mr. Co-Chairman.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Mr. Co-Chairman, Senator Rothfuss, for hosting us in your hometown, the home turf.
Go Pokes.
Go Pokes. A little bit of a rough start, but
Yeah, but go Pokes.
hope springs eternal. Perhaps it was Tennyson that said that. But all right, so let's go on to our second agenda item, just general updates. Director Lupien.
Let's do approval of minutes first.
Approval of the minutes. Excuse me. I guess we'll just do a verbal. All those in favor of approving the minutes?
Yeah, do we have one set or two sets? I can't remember what we ended up with. We just got one set.
We just
Okay.
got the one set in the packet that was sent to us. Or I guess, committee members, any objections or considerations?
Yeah, I'll just move acceptance of the minutes as provided.
Okay, it's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
It's moved and seconded. Any discussion or concern? We'll just do a voice vote here. All those in favor of approving the previous minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, that is passed. Thank you, Mr. Co-Chairman.
And then also a final note, Mr. Co-Chairman,
Yeah, please, Mr. Co-Chairman.
attendees, want to make sure that all of our attendees sign in. We've got a sign up sheet. So please do that, particularly if you're providing public testimony.
Yes, obviously, we want to make sure, we want to track all of you very closely. Mr. Lupien, are you ready for Director Lupien?
I guess we could have the minutes just very vague, like
Yeah.
a very kind gentleman
Yeah.
was suggesting or things along those lines. That's fine.
A distinguished gentleman.
Yeah, that's right.
Like it. Director, welcome. Obviously, we know who you are, but you know the protocol.
I do, Mr. Chairman. Thank you so much for inviting me. Both chairman members, I really appreciate having the opportunity to come and speak before you. I was thinking about it when I was working on my comments that we're at our 6th year of operation at the Center for Blockchain and Digital Innovation at the university here, and when you think about how long this nascent industry has actually been around, we've really stood the test of time. I mean, the industry is 15 years old, and the university has been in a leading position for a good piece of that, and that is to the credit of this group that has continued to support blockchain education and the blockchain projects that we've been doing. So certainly very grateful for you all and the time that you spend dealing with this. And I think we are seeing a bit of a sea change begin to happen across the US here in particular, but around the world. I think what we'll see in the next year or two around this space, I think is going to see much broader adoption and you know, new and interesting products that'll be available. I mean, even in the last year, we've seen, you know, the ETFs, both for Bitcoin and Ethereum in particular, you know, just completely change, you know, how financial service companies are dealing with our space. So you know, you know, your hard work is certainly, you know, I believe beginning to pay off. Here on campus, we continue to have our program running strong. Our enrollment in the blockchain program continues to be strong. We measure that through both the number of students that come into the fundamentals class, because the fundamentals class is kind of the gateway drug to the rest of the program. And
That's how you get them.
that's how you get them. You hook them in the fundamentals class, and then they go down the proverbial rabbit hole that we all go down, and then it's over for them. And so we've got a real good group of students coming into the fundamentals program, and the minor is still running, you know, strongly. We're doing more and more experiential programs on campus, many of which, you know, you've heard about, that I'll remind you again. We will be announcing the project with the company called Balcony that you met at the last meeting. This is the program where we're going to be developing a blockchain-based CFIUS compliant land registry system. And we all know that, you know, Wyoming has been afflicted by that with a mining company in Cheyenne that received an order from Washington to shut down. And the slant that we are putting on that program takes advantage of an interesting piece of technology that's blockchain adjacent, which is called zero knowledge proofs, where we're going to be able to provide beneficial ownership information that complies with CFIUS without disclosing who the beneficial owners happen to be. So for a state like Wyoming that really prides itself on its privacy, I think that's the right approach. And we are kind of leading in this space. So I believe that when we complete this project, it'll be attractive to other states as well too. So that we'll be kicking off that project in the next, I think we'll press release that as soon as the Stampede is completed. Another project that we press released about a week or so ago is called Climate Chain. And Climate Chain is where we're working with stakeholders involved in wheatland rare earths and dealing with the tax benefits of US sourced rare earths. And the problem with that presently is that the US really doesn't have much processing capability on rare earths anymore until we rebuild that. So US rare earths, in particular Wyoming rare earths, are going to have to go somewhere like China. And without a supply chain tracking system that can immutably track that the rare earths from the mines in Wyoming to processing and then back to US manufacturers who are using those rare earths, it's going to be difficult to take advantage of those tax credits. So we think we've got the solution on that. And again, students will absolutely be involved in all of these projects because again, it's about the experiential learning. One of the things you're going to be discussing over the next 2 days, as well as the Secretary of State filing system bill. And we do have a team that is standing by should that one be successful. And certainly the Blockchain Center supports that bill, and we are eager to work on that. That's been something that's been percolating for a number of years now, and I think technology now and the vendors available are at a right point in time where I think that bill makes sense to move forward. And one other thing I do want to hope that we can work in is I then reported last meeting that we're on our last $25,000 of our matching grant that you generously gave us about 4 years ago. And I think that's the sign of a successful program is when the government program accomplishes exactly what it was supposed to do and was fully utilized. So we are working with a number of donors right now that will qualify for using up that last 25,000. So we are hoping that you can find it in your legislative hearts to find something, because I will tell you, it significantly changes the conversation when you're talking to a donor. I can't tell you how powerful it is when someone comes to you and says, listen, we want to support your program. And, we've got X amount of money, and, you let them know that, that could actually be, doubled, and their impact can be doubled. It is an incredibly effective fundraising tool. And as the university, needs to do more of its own fundraising, those are the types of programs I think that you're going to find in the long run actually save the state a lot of money, because it really does bring in more private donations. This week is Stampede Week, and you are all a part of that. So thank you very much. This is, believe it or not, our 7th annual Stampede. Again, nothing in this space is 7 years old. So, I distinctly remember doing this back, 7 years ago when we were sleeping on, Red Cross cots, doing a, traditional hackathon over in the field house. And and there's nothing quite like the smell of people who don't leave the field house for 48 hours. So, that is indelibly marked in my mind. But the Stampede has gone through, a number of changes, and I think all have been have made it, more relevant, and I think more successful. We have today and tomorrow, which you are very much a part of. And then Wednesday is the primary day for the blockchain and digital asset conference space. And you are, of course, anyone here in the room or anyone listening is certainly welcome to join any of those festivities. And Wednesday night, we have our traditional big cocktail party where everyone gets to kind of mingle. We are also working in conjunction with the Green Johnson Center and doing a career day on Wednesday. So there'll be a number of both blockchain companies, but also, general College of Business career day festivities. So that'll be happening Wednesday as well too. We have our Secretary of State will be giving a talk at lunchtime on lunch Wednesday over at the Union. And then Thursday and Friday, we're partnering with our nascent School of Computing. And so the Stampede is expanding now to bring in other resources. And because part of the mission of the Blockchain Center is to help blockchain grow across campus. And I'll talk a little bit more about how that's happening in just a minute, but I want to stay on Stampede. So that's Thursday, Friday. The governor will be speaking at the lunch on Thursday. And again, you're all welcome to join. And then Friday and Saturday, we are continuing something that we started last year that was surprising. I don't want to say surprisingly successful, which was delightfully successful, was there is a direct correlation between esports and a lot of these nascent technologies. And so, all you young people that parents are telling you that you're not developing any career skills as you're playing your video games could not be more wrong. And esports, when you participate in esports, you naturally understand that things in a digital format only have value. And that's one of the hardest things to learn about digital assets before you go down the rabbit hole, is the proverbial, well, Bitcoin is money from nothing, or, the leap to understanding that things in a natively digital format can have value is that first leap that you have to make to really understand this space. And so young people in esports naturally get that through loot boxes and the other values that are now present inside of esports. So on Friday we have kind of our intramural esports day. And then on Saturday, we bring in competing teams, and we and have a little bit more formalized esports competition. And this year as well too, on Saturday, we're doing a Cardano Day. And so Cardano is partnering with us, and we'll have developers here on campus dealing with all things Cardano. So it's quite a week, and it is a good fundraiser for the CBDI. And again, a lot of that is also eligible for match, depending on how the format comes in. So all very positive. This is the kickoff of really our biggest blockchain week on campus here. Speaking of what's going on here on campus, as I mentioned, we are expanding blockchain on campus. I think a great example of that is the wonderful work that Dr. Bradley Rettler is doing now on campus. He has set up a much more academic program over in arts and science, where he'll be writing, along with some of his colleagues, peer-reviewed papers, which is something that was never within the mandate of the Blockchain Center. The Blockchain Center is entirely experiential, and it's entirely applied. With the arts and science getting involved, it's going to continue to raise the profile of blockchain on campus, and I think it's going to go a long way, as I've reported previously, for us to knock off USC as the #1 blockchain school, and hopefully we'll be able to step into that spot. I think another important part of that will be the new dean that we have in our College of Law. I think I'm letting her settle in a little bit before I really jump all over her on some of the things we can do over in the law school. But remember, we already have a pretty robust program over there with BLIC, which is our blockchain and law club. And Professor George Mosquery has been doing a great job over there. And I think there's some opportunity now with a dean that appreciates this technology to help us grow that program. As I announced at our last meeting, the Blockchain Center is also expanding our blockchain mining initiative. And as I mentioned on Thursday today, we're kind of doing, for those of you to remember who are old enough to remember Celebrity Deathmatch, what we're going to do is we're going to put operators of mining companies and the utilities in a room together, lock them in there with some food, and they're not going to come out until they, figure out how Wyoming can maintain the lead in this space. And one of our graduates of our program, Matt Skurlak, who you've met, who is also on our research team, is doing a phenomenal job. Basically bringing Bitcoin miners into the fold. And I don't want to mention all their names right now, but it is the largest publicly traded and largest private Bitcoin mining companies that are participating. And this is an area that I think Wyoming can take a significant lead. And frankly, I think as we as we work more closely, I think there's going to be opportunities for you all too to step in and deal with some of those challenges that, systemically exist right now around, energy and Bitcoin mining. Oh, yes.
Mr. Co-Chairman, please.
Just on that point, I wanted to bring a little bit of additional perspective on it. So we obviously have talked a lot over the last few years, and Director Lupien's been a part of those conversations about availability of power in the state of Wyoming, and particularly power that is available, right? We have an awful lot of power. We struggle to have enough power available. And so while we didn't have that on our agenda this year, we've talked a tremendous amount about it on the Minerals Committee. And in fact, I was just at the Energy Council in Tulsa last week. And that was a topic of conversation there with colleagues. So even though we don't see it on today's agenda, please be aware that it has not fallen off the radar. And I can tell you, in fact, anger is mounting as we have lost other non-Bitcoin projects that would have had significant impact to the state. And the reason we lost them is they could not get enough power. They had the right regulatory structure. They had the right resources, environment, everything else was in place, but they could not secure the power, and they're going to different states. And that's troubling. So
Right.
It's a broader conversation, and that conversation's ongoing. So I wanted to make sure, Director, that you and the rest of the committee knew that we were still heavily engaged there.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Co-Chairman, and if I might,
Of course.
I wholeheartedly agree, and Director Lupien, do correct me, but I feel like we're kind of in the same spot we were 4 years ago, right? Where, I hate saying it, but I get the sense, and from a lot of these folks in the space that they're dealing with utilities that really aren't coming off as particularly business friendly, right? And I don't know, I want to be pro-business. I know you are, and a lot of us here, and that continues to be a concern that they're really sending the wrong message to potential market participants. And that's, again, we could go in circles all day because I think the consensus in this room is high, but that's, Mr. Co-Chairman, I don't know if you got that sense at Energy Council, but we're still stuck in the mud,
Right. Well, I think there's also some good news as well. The Bitcoin mining environment has changed quite a bit in the last 4 years. And I'll probably get criticized for this next comment later. Some of the challenges the utilities had might have been earned, but Bitcoin mining has matured incredibly. And you look at companies that are coming to the state like CleanSpark. And this is their approach to Bitcoin mining, is entirely different than what you saw 4 and 5 and 6 years ago, where it was in many cases it was more smaller, private. So I think as I mentioned earlier in my comments, I think the industry is coming to us a little bit now. I mean from a not physically. Yes, physically, but just we were early, and when you're early, you have to deal with some of those challenges. But the industry has just matured so much that I think what we're going to find is that a lot of those early challenges that still left some scars are probably, not as much of a problem. And that's part of the reason why we want to get everybody in a room together, because I think it's a different environment today than when we were trying to push the rock uphill, 4 and 5 years ago. I mean, I can honestly say, I think it's been about a year since somebody legitimately looked at me and said, isn't it just drug dealers and money launderers? I think we're probably...
That long?
Yeah, I think it's been about a year now that the last time that somebody other than, Senator Elizabeth Warren has said that, but, sorry, Senator. I think the industry is coming to Wyoming now, where it's a different ball game. And I think that's going to make it, a lot easier for us. Sticking on Bitcoin mining a little bit, we did receive a generous donation that I'm not allowed to right now disclose who that is, but we've accepted 270 Bitcoin mining machines, which is about 1.2 megawatts worth of now they're not up and running right now because there's a lot we got to do, to get 1.2 megawatts, through a university system. But it's, we are going to be able to develop an amazing experiential program. Previously, we were running about a dozen machines, and a dozen machines is great for, students to kind of see what they look and smell and taste like, and do some flashes and some repairs and
Director,
things
real
like
quick,
that. Yes, sir.
What kind of mining machines were they? Did
They're
you say?
they're 19s.
They're 19s?
Yeah.
Okay.
So they're still relevant. They're not the latest and greatest, and but again, I think that's fine for our purposes. And so we are looking to do a number of things with those machines. We have received a generous offer for some of those machines to be co-located at a mining facility up in Gillette, where the agreement will be a zero loss to the university. So if, we will gain from the benefit of it, but we won't incur any of the negative costs if there's down months or things like that, which is perfect for a university. And our students will be able to go up and see some of those machines in a really truly a setting where you have to worry about power distribution. You have to worry about, dealing with heating and cooling and the noise abatement and all that kind of stuff. It's hard to do that with 12 machines. Also, we're looking through a collaboration with another Bitcoin mining company. We're looking to stand up essentially a program for learning to repair mining equipment. And so we've already purchased some of the manuals. We're working with a company that actually trains mining personnel on how to repair their own equipment. So we'll start it out as kind of a summer or a Christmas, type of program, and perhaps work it into the Bitcoin mining club environment. But we're also talking to the community colleges about making a program there a little bit more formalized. I mean, that's a unique skill set that quite honestly is exactly the types of jobs we're looking for here in Wyoming. So we're expanding there as well too. And then the last thing I want to leave you with before certainly I want to be available for questions is because of the matching grants and the expansion of the staff of the CBDI. Candace Ryder is in the back of the room, who's kind of my number two, way back there, and has taken a lot of the load off me, since I am teaching a full 313 teaching load as well too. We're able to attend a lot of conferences and really ride for the Wyoming brand. We've done the Bitcoin policy and blockchain policy conferences in Washington, D.C. And it's really refreshing for people to say, "Hey, Wyoming, you guys are, doing, great work." So we're definitely punching above our weight, and the more visible we are at conferences like that, I think the more that helps Wyoming. A couple members of the CBDI staff just returned from Switzerland last week, where we participated with Ripple. Ripple has been a generous donor to our program here, and so we certainly want to support them. And Ah, wonderful.
1 second. I'll be
Test,
right
test.
back up.
Yeah. Clarissa, are we?
Should
We're
be
good to
good.
go? All right. We
All right.
apologize for that technical difficulty.
No,
Director Lupian, please proceed.
We just completed the SALT conference up in Jackson, which was a truly unique and wonderful conference, not only because there is nowhere like Jackson, Wyoming. I mean, but just the folks that came out for that conference was absolutely spectacular. It was really the who's who of our space. And through the generosity of SALT, we received a substantial donation, there as well too. So, so it really concludes my, prepared remarks. I again just want to close by thanking you. What we're doing here at the university would not have been possible if it wasn't for this group. And so, we, are continuing to grow. There's no sign that the blockchain on campus is slowing down. Our goal is to keep expanding across campus, get more academic units involved, get more faculty involved, more students involved. And for me to report this time next year that, we have the #1 program in the country.
Director, thank you very much. I think before the, or Mr. Co-Chairman, please.
Yeah, one quick ask and getting back to the matching grant discussion. If you could get us and maybe work with staff to get us a breakdown of the entire
Sure.
grant match, so the history of it, so that we have that in hand as we start talking to colleagues about the
Sure.
future of a matching grant, that would be
Yeah,
useful.
happy to. I mean, the two biggest items, Mr. Chairman, through the chair, was, if you recall, we matched a grant or a gift from IOG, which allowed us to create the Wobble Center over in engineering several years ago. And then the other significant one was the Marcy Fund. And we're using the Marcy Fund today to fund scholarships and some grad research work. We're using it not only for blockchain, but also for some cybersecurity, which fits into the digital innovation part of our mandate. I do want to mention, the blockchain space is evolving a little bit, and there are now blockchain adjacent technologies. I mentioned zero knowledge proof is one of them, but certainly, cybersecurity and on-chain tracking is an important part of what we're dealing with. We're also dealing with digital twins, which is a incredible new technology that allows, AI and blockchain to optimize systems in a virtual world. We're getting much more involved in that. And, I may be one of the few people, probably because I'm old, that still thinks that the metaverse is just a wonderful technology looking for an application. And, in things like, virtual universities and the entertainment space and things like that, I think we're not done seeing where the metaverse is going to go. So the CBDI, having digital innovation in its name, was designed specifically understanding that, we were going to have these adjacent technologies interacting with blockchain. So, one of the things that I think we did exceptionally well at UW, and we learned this from some of our peer universities, was, make sure that you design your center in a way where you can do that. Other universities that have come up with, blockchain centers of excellence are finding that, blockchain in some cases is not the shiny object anymore, but we've done a real good job of making sure that we've stayed relevant. And I think we've done a much better job than I think any university I've heard, where we're reaching out to other academic units across campus, and like arts and science, like law. And as you all know, we're partnered with agriculture and engineering and College of Business and School of Energy. And because we structured our center properly, I think we're going to be relevant indefinitely. So with that, I'm open for any questions you may have.
Thank you, Director. I've got a couple, but I want to make sure the committee gives the time to weigh in. I did not see anybody in the room. Is there anybody online? Clarissa, okay. Yep, Director Whitby, I really do appreciate that. I know we've got some other folks that need to testify, but
Mhm.
the one thing you mentioned was just kind of having that career day,
Mhm.
getting interaction with folks who are actually, companies, employers in the space and some of these prospective students. Is there any kind of stats you can, or maybe just a brief update on how that's progressing? Are they hiring kids out of this program, or what does that look like as of right now?
I don't have particular stats, Mr. Chairman, but I can certainly provide them to you. What I do have is, I speak to a lot of employers who are coming to us either for interns. We're about to announce a rather substantial internship program with a blockchain company that'll probably take 10 or 15 interns a semester. And their goal obviously is to convert those interns into full-time employees. So intuitively, we have a lot of information. One of the challenges employers have is, blockchain is so unique that when you hire someone, your first 2 or 3 months, you often have to teach your new employees what's blockchain and what's this industry. And then your next 2 or 3 months are them learning their jobs. So the fact that, especially within this space, that we're positioning new employees that already have that background knowledge, they're saying it's speeding up their onboarding dramatically. And that's a direct financial benefit to companies. And as we continue to evolve Wyoming's economy, this will pay off. You've heard me joke about it a number of times, that, besides extraction and energy, our college educated youth is our next biggest export. And, this technology and what we're doing here in the state will pay dividends in keeping UW alum here in Wyoming. And that's ultimately, I think, our goal is keep Wyomingites in Wyoming and diversify our economy. And that's entirely what our program is about.
Director, thank you. What's that, Mr. Co-Chairman?
I was just gonna say, we should bring Julie across.
If there are not any questions for the director, I know we've got Dean Hale who wants to maybe make a few remarks, and the committee would certainly welcome that. Is there anything else you want to add, Director? Okay.
Thank you very much.
Excellent.
Thanks, Steve.
Dean Hale, obviously we know who you are, but just for the record, just state your name and your title, please.
Green light.
Yeah.
So get
Let's
yourself
get that.
back.
Oh,
There you
there
go.
we go. I'm Julie Hill. I'm the new dean of the University of Wyoming College of Law, and I am delighted to be here today. For those of you who might not be familiar with me, because I've only been here a couple of months, so I haven't had a chance to meet everyone that I'd like to yet, but I certainly intend to get that done. I started my legal career here in Wyoming, over in Cheyenne, about, I say 20, but I worry now that I'm testifying and it's really closer to 25 years ago. But then my husband's also an attorney, and our career paths took us elsewhere, but we were always sort of looking for opportunities that would work out well for us to get back to Wyoming. He's from a ranch just south of Saratoga over in Carbon County. So when the University of Wyoming College of Law deanship opened, I was really excited about it. And I've spent the last 11 years at the University of Alabama School of Law in Tuscaloosa, where I was most recently the vice dean. But maybe for you, the most interesting part of my background is that my academic specialty is banking and payment systems law. And one of my
Boy, do we have a lot to talk about.
in fact, I think that it is not boasting to say that I am one of the leading experts on non-traditional access to banking, and certainly one of the leading experts on Federal Reserve master accounts and access to master accounts. So even though I've been outside of Wyoming, I've been working for a long time on academic research that directly impacts the economy of Wyoming. And so that's another reason that we were very excited to be moving back here, where my academic research has such important on the ground implications. And that's another reason that I'm excited to be at the College of Law, because it is ideally positioned to be a leader in this space. Now, to be clear, the College of Law's work with Steve's blockchain center started long before I got here. They have been, we have a blockchain law and innovation club that has been quite active in bringing speakers and identifying job opportunities that law students have been spearheading for a long time. And then most of you probably have met our faculty member, Professor George Moxery, who is active in this area. He runs a business law practicum class, partly with some grant money from Ripple, that helps students get hands-on legal training in business, but also in business related to blockchain. So sometimes they represent people, but other times they work on like policy type papers. And of course, his scholarship also touches on blockchain law and innovation. And then we have another faculty member who originally started out as an environmental law expert, but is moving more into technology and AI. And his research, I think, is going to dovetail nicely with some of the things that we're doing on blockchain. But, just from the big picture, because I can't help myself, this is my area of academic specialty. We know at the law school that we're not the ones that make technology work. We are not the ones that get things done, but what we do is we create the framework so that there are proper incentives for people to develop technology. And so that when technology is developed, it fits into our society and works in a positive way. And so it's really important, for example, if you're going to have digital currencies, that people know what the legal implications are of paying with those or holding those, or what the tax implications are. And that's all law. And so what we'd like to do at the law school is we'd like to be a resource for thinking about the best way to integrate new technology with our existing framework of the law. There's always going to be something new. There's always going to be some change. And the beauty of our legal system is that ideally, through the legislature, we can make changes to the law that adapt to our society. Of course, there are other ways to make changes to the law, including through the courts, that are time-consuming and not necessarily as well thought out as legislative changes. And so, we'd really like to build our expertise and be a resource to the state. So if there's something specific you're wondering about, I'm happy to take questions, but we're excited to be here and excited to work more and more closely with the blockchain folks here in the state.
Committee, any questions for Dean Hill? Seeing none, don't worry. Well, we want you to stick around because there's a lot of ground we need to cover, especially on some of that master account discussion.
Well, I'm right, but not everyone agrees.
I tried telling that to my wife and it did not go well. But thank you, Dean. We do really appreciate your enthusiasm on this topic. It's greatly appreciated. I think we got up next. We've got a update from Senator Lummis's office. Council Land, would you care to come and testify, please?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chairman, members of the committee. My hair notwithstanding, I am Chris Land, General Counsel to U.S. Senator Cynthia Lummis. It's a pleasure to be with you today. I'm just going to give a brief update on all things DC and the legislative situation, and then I'm happy to stand for any questions you might have. We've made a great deal of progress on the legislative front in the last few months. I think the policy is almost completely baked on, what Congress is eventually going to do on stable coins, market structure regulation, the big topics in this space. Now it's just a matter of the election politics playing out the way they're going to play out, and us getting the political will to move legislation. There's a window to do something at the end of the year that we're going to push very hard to get done. If something doesn't get done this year, next year is going to be very difficult because every tax provision in the tax code that means anything to Americans is expiring next year. So Congress is going to spend a lot of time next year on tax and nominations. Whoever wins the White House is going to have a new slate of nominees, and that's probably going to take up most of next year. So we need to get crypto done this year, or it's going to be delayed to 2026 probably. So we're going to be pushing as hard as we can at the end of the year. Senator Lummis has great relationships on both sides of the aisle. Democrats and Republicans, depending on who wins the White House and who controls Congress. So we'll be well placed to move legislation at the appropriate time. Also, I should share with you too that Senate Banking Committee Ranking Member Tim Scott has said that if we are fortunate enough to capture the majority in November, there will be a new digital asset subcommittee on the Banking Committee that Senator Lummis will be chair of, and we will have a very, very aggressive and ambitious schedule for the next 2 years, not only doing legislation, but also investigating things that need to be investigated in Washington, D.C. So, with that, I will stand for any questions.
Only imagine.
Yeah, Councilor Land, I can only imagine.
Yeah.
Committee, any questions for Councilor Land?
Sure.
Let's see, Mr. Co-Chairman, please.
I would just ask one that I frequently ask, and it sounds like everything's fine, but based on the direction that you see the legislation shoring up at the federal level, are we going to have any concerns with any of the work that we have where we need to have some revision bills?
Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Co-Chairman Rothfuss, there will probably need to be a cleanup bill on the stable token. As I mentioned in the past, it's probably unavoidable. There'll be some other things I think they'll probably need to be done in cleanup, but broadly speaking, I think it's one of Senator Lummis's biggest priorities is building on what Wyoming's done, not forcing Wyoming to change. So we're taking a lot of the lessons learned at the macro level and putting them into federal law at some level. So I think broadly speaking, we're all headed in the same direction. It'll be just some details around the margins. Yep.
Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Land. And I'll ask you the same question you asked back in July, and I asked it because things evolve, situations change, just kind of the dynamics in the Senate can be very fluid, but how are things looking right now to get something to the Oval Office by the end of the year for this legislation? Has it improved, or is it still, it really just kind of depends?
I think the odds have improved, but I still wouldn't, bet on any bill, including the appropriations bills passing Congress. So we're going to do everything we can to get it done. I'm, taking years off my life at the moment trying to get legislation passed. So, but yeah, it's going to happen at some point in the next few years. It might happen at the end of the year, but who knows? Yeah.
One more question.
Yeah.
Ms. Co-Chairman, please.
In past testimony, it sounded like things have been shoring up in the House as well, more bipartisan support, more collaboration.
Yeah.
Anything else to report there? Or is that still generally consistent with the direction things are going?
Councilor Land.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Co-Chairman Rothfuss, I think generally speaking, there's been a bipartisan eruption in both chambers. The House passed FIT 21 with 71 Democrats, and we actually hit the magic number of 60 on the SAB 121 repeal in May. And getting 60 votes in the Senate's like climbing Mount Everest on a piece of legislation. So like, I think there's a great deal of bipartisan interest in both chambers. One thing I neglected to mention in my update too, that potentially has some bearing on the SPDI is Bank of New York Mellon is looking to get more involved in the crypto custody business. They had some problems with Staff Accounting Bulletin 121, and the SEC has apparently given them some kind of variance from SAB 121 to move forward. And also, part and parcel of that is the Fed, as the Fed regulates Bank of New York Mellon's bank holding company, they would have had to have given their non-objection under current, legal requirements and guidance to Bank of New York Mellon getting into the digital asset custody business. So,
Mr. Co-Chairman, follow up?
No, it's funny how that happened.
Yeah, Mr. Co-Chairman, there's a lot of, yeah.
Never would have predicted it.
Yeah.
Indeed. It's a strange world we're in.
yeah.
Mr. Land, in that vein, I mean, any sense, are they going to go through the bit license process with the state of New York? Or are they kind of looking at alternative options or? what do
Bank
you
of New
hear?
York Mellon.
Yeah,
Yeah.
correct.
So they're going to argue the bit license preempted, very likely.
Hmm.
Yep.
Councilor Land, in the House version, if I recall correctly, there were a
Yeah.
couple of provisions in that draft that didn't quite sync properly or maybe would have had a little bit of a negative impact.
Yeah.
If it gets that far and it goes to the reconciliation process between
Yeah.
the two chambers,
Yeah.
what's your sense on the House's willingness to amend or change some of those provisions that are a little problematic?
The Wyoming legislature, Mr. Chairman, the Wyoming legislature is a well-oiled machine. Senator Lummis was talking last week about how she wants to bring more of the Wyoming legislature to Congress next year. And that's all like just some context to say that conference committees aren't really a thing as much as you would think in Congress. So we were going to try to do what's called pre-conferencing, where the House and Senate agree to a deal before legislation's passed, so it can just go all the way through the process to the president's desk.
We want DC to be more like Wyoming.
It
I like
would.
that
Yeah,
answer.
no, we're gonna try to bring some of the best parts of the Wyoming legislature to the subcommittee next year. She's asked me to take a look at that. So
Well, we appreciate that. Senator Furphy, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Of course, we're looking at major changes in banking here in Wyoming.
Yeah.
Are you seeing anything at the national level on changes in that area? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Land.
Senator Furphy, what kind of change are you talking about? Changes to the SPDI framework or changes to like banking more generally?
Senator Furphy.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're looking at, well, first of all, we looked at open banking.
Oh,
We
got
got
it.
that passed. Then special depository
Mhm.
institutions, they're having
Yep.
tough time getting federal approval.
Yep.
So, yeah.
Got it.
those are kind of the areas.
Got it.
Mr. Land.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Furphy, on the open banking piece, I think the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the CFPB, is working hard on open banking. I think they have a rule that may be finalized at some point if it hasn't been finalized already. I think it would be interesting to compare that rule to Wyoming's legislation. And on the master account front and novel chartering front, I think the custodian matter is going to be argued in the 10th Circuit later this year, early next year, and I think that, for better or for worse, is it's going to be the linchpin about how novel chartering proceeds in the U.S. one way or another. I think Caitlin Long's testifying about it tomorrow, and she'll have a lot more insights for you in that front. But we are monitoring it closely, and we will have a lot to say about it at the right time. So Senator Lummis filed an amicus brief with Senator Daines in the custodian matter, and Fed's violated the law, and hopefully the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals agrees.
Any follow-up, Senator Furphy? Seeing none. Well, as always, Councilor Land, we really appreciate your enthusiasm and dedication to this effort.
All right.
It's been sustained and it's paid off.
Thank you.
Thank
We're just hopefully getting to the best part in the next few years. So,
Oh.
all right. Thank you.
Always love a good crescendo.
All this stuff they are.
That's right.
All right.
Uh,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
thank you again, Councilor. So up next, looks like we've got, Mr. Cook. It is. Mr. Paul, please. Need a welcome and update and any information you'd like to share with the public and the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chair, and members of the committee. My name is Anthony Apollo, and I currently serve as the Executive Director for the Wyoming Stable Token Commission. So as a quick reminder before we kick off here, Joel Reville and David Pope also serve on the commission and are currently in attendance as liaisons of the Select Committee. So if there are any other commissioners who are online in a speaking role, I would ask that they perhaps pop off so we don't have a quorum of a different commission within the confines of the committee. So I'll give that a second. And while that resolves itself, if it needs to, I will read our disclaimers here. Key decisions pertaining to the Wyoming Stable Token Initiative will be made by the commissioners of the Stable Token Commission or the state legislature in public meetings such as this. At this time, no blockchain has been selected for deployment of Wyoming stable tokens, and no Wyoming stable tokens have been issued. Further, the only commissioners are those appointed by the statute, the governor, or a majority vote of the commission. Information outside of these public meetings should only be considered factual and legitimate if it is distributed through our official channels. At this time, these are limited to our website at stabletoken.wyo.gov, the Wyoming Legislature website at wyoledge.gov, and our social media channels with the @WyoStable username on Twitter, YouTube, GitHub, and Warpcast. So with that preamble out of the way, today's
No forward-looking statement clauses or anything like that?
no, this is not investment advice. I am not your lawyer, et cetera, Mr. Co-Chair. So during today's update, I want to provide a
Director, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So during today's discussion, I'll provide an update on the industry writ large, some of the progress we've made on personnel within the commission, what we're doing to raise awareness around the Stable Token Initiative, and then we'll discuss some of our next steps, particularly those around procurement. So from an industry perspective, the market cap of stablecoins is at an all-time high, which has now breached about $170 billion. Predominantly, that has been driven by growth of both Tether, which is sitting around 117 billion, and Circle, which is the largest domestic stablecoin issuer, at about $34 billion. That being said, there's an additional boost across a couple of vectors. So one to point towards is PayPal's stablecoin offering, PYUSD, launched on Solana natively, and that's picked up several $100 million of market volume for them. I'd also note that Euro-denominated stablecoins are now available under the Markets in Crypto Assets Regulation Framework in the EU, known as MiCA. And beyond that, there are now yield-bearing stable tokens that are growing quite rapidly, which is predominantly being done overseas and offshore due to some of the concerns in the US around the securities implications. We're seeing a lot of that activity take off in Bermuda with programs like the Mountain Protocol, for instance. I believe this wasn't known the last time we spoke in July, but since then, Tether, again, the largest stable token issuer there is, announced their profits for the first half of 2024 in the amount of $5.2 billion. So they've made quite a nice chunk of change on their offering. Of course, I'm not trying to compare what Wyoming would look to build to what Tether is offering. When they take their interest income on the underlying reserves, they plow it back into things like Bitcoin. They've made a number of investments now into different startups and technologies, whereas we would be taking those funds and, again, on a quarterly basis, disseminating them into the school foundation fund. But the point stands, this is a rapidly growing industry, and there is a financial incentive here to move quickly on some of this. And one more thing I'd like to note from kind of the global perspective is there is louder and louder noise about the BRICS Plus coalition issuing their own digital currency. That is yet to be seen if that really truly does take off, but there is more and more noise about it. And last week, the Bank of Russia did announce their digital ruble would be launching in July of 2025. So we're certainly keeping an eye out for that. One final note on some news and metrics. Last week, Castle Island Ventures, in collaboration with Visa and Brevan Howard Digital, put out a report titled Stablecoins, the Emerging Market Story, which sampled about 2,500 existing cryptocurrency users in Nigeria, Indonesia, Turkey, Brazil, and India. And just to give you some of the findings as an example, 69% have converted their local currency into stablecoins. 39% have used stable coins for a cross-border payment, and 34% of 18 to 24-year-olds convert local fiat to stable coins on a weekly basis. So again, we're seeing the use case for stable coins not only in the US, but outside of it as well. And before I switch over to discussion of personnel, if the committee had any questions about the global macro trends here, I'm happy to answer.
Director, thank you very much for that update thus far. Committee, any questions for Director Paulo? Seeing none, I don't think I see any online. So please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So in terms of personnel, when we spoke last, I think I mentioned that we were looking to bring on 4 different roles: a senior business project manager, a chief financial officer, a chief information security officer, and a chief risk and compliance officer to build out the team. So I would like to introduce Stephanie Chan, who has joined as our senior business project manager. Her first day was Friday, so this is certainly a trial by fire. And she joins bringing her digital asset and blockchain experience via tenure at Metal, which is a blockchain focused on banking and financial institutions, as well as TASIN, which is a local company building a hybrid decentralized exchange with a compliance layer on top of it as well. So she'll be working with me on the day-to-day here in Cheyenne. I look forward to accelerating the progress we've been making over the last year.
I'd
I'd also,
here. Thank you so much for joining us.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to also note that we have an offer out for a chief risk and compliance officer. We expect that to be effectuated within the coming days. This will be a fairly high-profile hire for us, so we'll make that person known, and I would hope that we have them as part of our commission meeting coming up this Thursday. But that is going to be finalized soon. So more to come on that role, but that is a very big position that we need to fill for the Stable Token Commission. That role is going to be responsible for creating our risk framework, our compliance framework, and really making sure that everything we do with the stable token complies with the regulations it needs to, while also leveraging kind of best practices from any other frameworks, whether globally speaking, even proposed federal frameworks, which haven't gone into law yet, but looking into the directionality of those and fusing them into what the Stable Token Commission will put forth as a rule set to be promulgated in the near future. I'd also mention that our CFO and CISO searches continue. We've had 30 applicants for the CFO role, and we're working with the State Treasurer's Office and other commissioners to interview some of those candidates. And we've had just under 100 applications for our Chief Information Security Officer. We're working with, again, commissioners and several subject matter advisors to interview those candidates because there is such a technical component to those discussions, as well as the policy experience needs to go along with the technical component, that we're tagging in a couple of advisors we've worked with in the past who have, again, no formal business relationship with the commission, but people who are conversant enough in the technology and interested enough in what we're building that they can help us interview some of these folks and get the right candidates in front of the commission. Couple other notes. We've also brought on an intern. His name is Joey Yu. He's a second-year law student at Georgetown. He finished an internship at Circle in early August, and he's joined us recently. What I've tasked him with is a review of the 70 pieces of legislation that this committee has put forth since its inception, looking to categorize and organize those into how they came to fruition, looking to bucket these things into, for example, categories like privacy rights, property rights, perhaps revenue generation, and look to create a framework that could be built on top of, perhaps by someone with more of a marketing focus in the future. And to that extent, the Stable Token Commission has set up a internship with the honors program at the University of Wyoming, which is now open for application, if I have that right, Mr. Co-Chair. With that, I will pause for any other questions on the personnel.
Thank you, Director. Certainly sounds like you've given your intern quite the task, but committee, any questions for the Director online, or Mr. Co-Chairman?
No.
Okay, I'm not seeing none. Director, as always, I know you've put a great deal of effort into this, and this committee certainly appreciates that effort. So thank you very much.
My pleasure, Mr. Chairman. And I mentioned about Joey's role. It is quite the effort, but he also made the mistake of mentioning his first year of law school was focused on state legislation. So
Wow.
seemed like a good task for him to handle.
A glutton for punishment, it seems like. Again, thank you very much, Director. We really appreciate that. So let's see,
Anything else?
is there's anything else you want to add, Director? My apologies.
So I Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We'd like to talk just quickly about the awareness of the program and some of the next steps.
Of course, please.
So one of the things we want to make sure the commission bounces is making the public aware of what it is that we're building. And I would shy away from calling that specifically a marketing campaign. Typically that would apply when we have a social media platform and a roadmap for all of that. And perhaps we're a little closer to launching a product. But that being said, we also want to make sure people are aware of what we're building now, because we don't want to release something into the ether, pun not intended, and not have anyone know about it. Just because you build it doesn't mean people are going to adopt it if they don't know it's there. I'll refer to what Professor Lupian said a few moments ago. The SALT conference, the Wyoming Blockchain Symposium hosted in Jackson a few weeks back, was a great kind of coming out party for the program. We had a panel, a fireside chat between Governor Gordon and Commissioner Reville. And we've got great feedback on that so far. And actually, we got some media coverage as well. So CNBC picked that up, and I've had conversations with a few other national outlets since then, and I would expect those to be live in the coming days as well. In terms of a few other stats to throw at you, since we kicked off our request for information period at the end of last year around Thanksgiving, I've now spoken to just about 600 people across 300 organizations who are interested in some way, shape, or form on collaborating with stable token development. About 70% of those are potential vendors who would like to propose a book of services to contribute towards the token, again, whether that's technical, back-end, financial ops, what have you. But I will say we are now growing in the policy sector and also in our discussions with regulatory agencies, both domestic and international. One last note I'll make on kind of the awareness and then the teams I've spoken to since. So, Mr. Chairman, during our last conversation, you asked me about the commission's ability to scale across multiple blockchains. Again, as a reminder, we do have a remit from the select committee to have a multi-chain offering. And while that will take some time and some stress testing to make sure we could roll out compliant and technically sound offerings across different chains, I've spent a decent amount of time with the cross-chain interoperability protocols, speaking with them about their technology and how that could help us scale between networks more rapidly than perhaps going one by one. So I wanted to make sure I communicated that because that seemed to be a point of interest in the last conversation. And I've certainly been doing some diligence on that. And it is a robust tech stack that is emerging as we speak, which is great to see. So I'll pause there.
Well, and Director, if I recall correctly, I believe Circle has done cross-chain offerings as well. So, I mean, there's proof of concept that can be done. Am I correct in that assumption?
Mr. Chairman, that is correct. Circle has what they call a cross-chain transfer protocol. Some of these others call themselves a cross-chain interoperability protocol. Somewhat of a semantic difference, somewhat of a technical difference, probably. Some of it's above my pay grade, but there is certainly precedent for it, both with the large incumbents building their own internally and organizations building their own as a standalone platform that's being adopted more widespread than within one company.
Any further questions, or please proceed, Director?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We'll start wrapping up here. So this is the last meeting of the Select Committee for the year. I would not expect any legislation to be brought forth on behalf of the Stable Token Act or Stable Token Commission ahead of the legislative session. Of course, if that changes along the way, as Mr. Land mentioned, happy to facilitate and work with the committee as need be and as is appropriate. I'll also mention we did not request any supplemental budget and do not expect to in the near future. We received our budget of $5.8 million on July 1st. That is meant to bring us to June 30th of 2026 at the end of the biennium. And the hope would be to be self-sufficient by that point in time. The last note I'll make about the Select Committee is before we launch a fully reserved token, I would be specific, we're talking about the live fully reserved token. I have a report due to the Select Committee that will explain the mechanics of how that will work, the economics thereof, and the compliance layer as well. The way the statute was written previously was a bit more open about that. That was amended during the budget session this year to make sure we were talking about the live and publicly available version of the token rather than anything we put out on perhaps a test network for stress testing. From the Commission's perspective, we have our next meeting this upcoming Thursday on the 19th here in this room. I'm going to get familiar with the seat right here. It will be probably a lengthier meeting where we discuss some of the things we've had on the back burner for a while, a business plan, our roadmap, deadlines, budget, and frequently asked questions as well. We've had a number of inbound questions from interested parties. We've seen some of the representations of the Stable Token Committee and the project in the media, which are not necessarily accurate when it comes to some of the terminology that's being used. I would certainly say we're not building a cryptocurrency, but those are some of the headlines. So we want to make sure we straighten some of that out. And then the high level goal is to have pre-qualifications for vendors to work again on any of our particular tech stacks, whether that's technology, finance, operations, or legal, available after our October meeting on October 24th, and looking to have request for proposals drafted at our November session on November 21st. That might still be a bit of a tight time frame, but we continue to work fairly robustly and aggressively in terms of our, working towards our goal. Mr. Co-Chairman, as you mentioned earlier, we are the fastest growing department in the state of Wyoming as well. So if we have a CRCO on sometime this week, we'll have tripled our size. So that should triple our speed at a minimum. And we expect to continue that momentum. I will say one more thing about kind of scaling here. We are looking to get our subcommittees back off the ground formally next week. There's something that was started up before my tenure. We put those on pause for a bit to kind of organize the way that the agency would work. But now we're definitely at a position where we want to have those subject matter advisors in our inner circle, opining on the work that we're doing, giving us some input. And now it's a matter of just doing the herding the cats exercise of making sure all the codes of conduct are signed and finding the right timeframes for commissioners, myself, subject matter advisors, and the team to all be open on a recurring basis week to week. With that, that was what I wanted to present today. So thank you again for your time. Happy to answer any questions from the committee, and I will be here for the public comment and happy to answer any questions then as well.
Committee, any comment or any questions? Mr. Co-Chairman? Director, maybe just briefly touch on, you talked about, you gotta be careful about marketing, right? Obviously, when you're dealing with this type of thing, the SEC pays very close attention to the language that's used, but of course, we also want to get the word out too. So, I mean, to the extent that you can you maybe elaborate a little bit on that and what is kind of your thought process there?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So what I'll say from experience is when I launched a security token, one that was intentionally a security token with a gentleman, NBA athlete named Spencer Dinwiddie, then on the Brooklyn Nets, now on the Dallas Mavericks, today, a compliant debt security token, essentially a tokenized bond on Ethereum. The way some of that manifests is making sure that every social media post goes through a lawyer, which may not make for the most exciting social media presence, but it does make for one that hopefully does not get that much pushback. So that would certainly be a lens we put on that going forward. And again, I think we're at a point now where we just want to raise awareness of what it is we're building, what it would do for the state, what it could do for the broader industry, and what it could do globally as a mechanism for settling dollar-denominated transactions anywhere all over the world in 30 seconds or less, with fees equaling fractions of a cent with no counterparty credit risk. And that was the promo right there, I guess. So let me know how that was.
Excellent, Director. Again, last chance, questions? Seeing that online. Director Powell, thank you very much for your time. We deeply appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
So I think up next, we've got, looks like we got federal legislation update, table token. Looks like we got mining. I think
cryptocurrency mining update.
Yeah, I think Mr. Bradford, I think I see you up there.
Yes,
Are you
sir.
good to tee us up and give us a little update?
Absolutely.
And just for the record, just state your name and who you're with for the committee, please.
Excellent. Thank you, committee. I'm Zachary Bradford. I am the CEO and president of CleanSpark. CleanSpark's America's Bitcoin miner. We are amongst the largest in the US. All of our operations are also domestic. I'm sure some of the questions today that I'll get into for an update is actually going to be about the acquisition we did in North Range near FE Warren Air Force Base. The seller was subject to a CFIUS order, and I'm happy to report that late last week, we gained permission of CFIUS and we closed on that transaction. So we are now the owners of the property, effective today.
Outstanding.
Congratulations on that.
Thank you. Thank you. It was a process, and as much as engaging with the federal government can be trying, we found it insightful, and as we do with all of our efforts is we lean into the community engagement, and we plan to have a good, long relationship with members of the base going forward and plan to work closely with them. In addition to that property, we also do, a few weeks ago, closed on the Camp Stool property of 30 megawatts. So CleanSpark is now moving forward. Between the two properties, we have 75 megawatts. We've invested a little over $25 million on our efforts to date. We expect to invest an additional $40 to $50 million on infrastructure over the next 3 to 6 months at both properties. And after that, at least another $100 million on servers, at which time, of course, we plan to hire and build the employee base at both of those properties. With that said, I'm happy to take any further questions on the efforts that we've been going through.
Mr. Co-Chairman, please.
Mr. Bradford, do you have a projected number of jobs that those will represent once both of them are up and running? So let's say about a year out from now.
Yeah, about
Mr.
a year
Bradford,
out from
please go
now.
ahead.
Oh, thank you. I expect that we will have close to 40 jobs. What we do differently compared to maybe some of the prior operators is we generally staff 3 shifts. So we have employees on site monitoring the servers 24 hours a day, 365. And so it's a good opportunity to add a meaningful amount of jobs.
Thank you.
Committee, any questions for Mr. Bradford? Seeing anybody else online of the committee members?
I
I've got a
have
couple,
one
but
more different.
yeah, Mr. Co-Chairman, please.
Mr. Bradford, what are your longer term plans? Are there any other locations in Wyoming? One of the things that we talked about a little bit earlier was actually challenges about power acquisition. And we see that as a limiting factor in the state of Wyoming, something that we've struggled with. Can you maybe provide any comment on looking around the rest of the state, anything with regard to power availability? Just provide a little context for us there.
Mr. Bradford, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, absolutely. We do expect that Wyoming will be a meaningful part of our growth over the next 4 years. We have expanded now. Wyoming's the 5th state that we will be operating in. Now, what we found in the way that we engage in all states that we go into, it's about being a partner with the utility. And we refer to it as our front door approach. So we want to be in areas and places with abundant power, or power that has intermittent needs that we can, and the community at large can benefit from our participation in. In addition, we expect to be investing in further infrastructure, things such as substations that will actually allow greater electrification and distribution of power available on the grid. Our intention and our hope is, just like we did in Georgia, where Georgia was a net export state and still is, it allowed that power to stay in state and generate jobs and tax dollars inside the state lines. So we look forward to further growth, but we will be doing so with engagement with the communities and the utilities.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Co-Chair, any follow-up? Well, Mr. Co-Chairman and Mr. Bradford, that was very much along my concerns, and my question is that, 4 years ago, obviously China bans crypto mining. There's this giant rush here in the United States. My co-chairman, myself, and others, we really tried to push Wyoming to be in position to really capitalize on the opportunity. For a whole host of reasons that did not happen. And part of that was just frustration with utilities. So I certainly welcome news like this, that you've had a productive relationship with our local utility providers. I think it certainly is a welcome trend. And as the co-chair of this committee, I really hope that continues, because we want to be business friendly, not to get too much on the soapbox, but we feel that outfits like yours can really help us create those good blue collar jobs here in Wyoming. So we, I said it to you in person, and we'll say it here on the record. We really want you here, and we really deeply appreciate everything you're investing in Wyoming, and we want to facilitate that to certainly the greatest extent that we can.
Thank you.
Committee members, is there anything else before we let them go? And I guess, Mr. Bradford, maybe my question is there anything further that we can do to help you be successful?
Appreciate it. No, at this point, we're in great shape. the state has been very business friendly. We've engaged with many of the offices, both at the state and also at the federal level with Senator Lummis's office. It's been very welcoming. This is a bit of a coming home for myself and my co-founder. He was from Lander, Wyoming. I'm from a small town in Utah. So we've been on the East Coast for so much of what we've done to grow this business. So it's great to come back to the West.
Well, again, we're extremely glad you're here, and thank you for, I know you're got a busy schedule, so we really appreciate you setting aside some time to zoom in and give us an update. So we really appreciate that.
Thank you. I appreciate the committee's time.
So now we've heard from CleanSpark. I think we've got a couple other folks that we want to hear from. Is any of the Crypto Night folks in the room? We've got them on the agenda. I'm not seeing any. Are they zooming in? It doesn't look like they're zooming in.
No, Mr. Chairman, I believe they were planning to be here in person, but I haven't seen them yet this morning.
I'll see. It's 9:50. Maybe, Mr. Co-Chairman, what do you think? I mean, we'd love to hear from them. If they show up, maybe we can squeeze them back in at some point.
Yeah, I think that's the way to go. We can find a moment for them if they do arrive this morning, but
Okay.
at this point, probably go to public comment on the.
Yeah,
on
let's,
today's topic.
I know we've covered a lot of the ground there between the Stable Token Commission, crypto mining, federal legislation, UW and the center. So is there any public comment in the room on any of those agenda items that we've covered? I don't think so. Anybody online? Okay. All right. Well, we'll close public comment on that component of the agenda. So I think we're sort of on time-ish, ballpark.
Been worse.
Yeah, we've been worse. Mr. Lupien, let's put you back in the hot seat. I know you wanted to give us an update on some of the stuff you've done on cybersecurity. So,
And Mr. Chairman, is there anybody else you want?
yeah, is there anybody else you want up here with you? Yeah, feel free to bring up your team. Actually, I think we can get back on schedule.
All right.
Okay, all right.
Mostly is information that we. Excuse me, I'm Steve Lupien. I'm the director of the Center for Blockchain and Digital Innovation at the University of Wyoming. In a previous meeting, we had presented really two documents to you. One of them was kind of a PowerPoint that detailed what's really happening. I mean, we live in a time right now where changes, legislative changes are really necessary for us to keep ahead of cybersecurity and cybersecurity attacks, and the way that we deal with those. And, I mean, some of our old legislation still says things like, fax information to, it's that kind of stuff. So really, all we really wanted to talk about at this portion of the meeting was to answer any questions you might have had about the red line markups that we had presented to you at the last meeting, and to see what the appetite was for making those legislative changes to update our current legislation to the really the new cybersecurity environment that exists today. And there are a number of resources available to you in order to accomplish that. Certainly one is the Wyoming Cybersecurity Action Network, WyoCAN. And we've got a pretty robust team of folks that are expert there. We also have Cyber Wyoming, so another organization that is available, and we are working, closely with Wyoming Homeland Security as well too on some of these issues. But there's opportunity and challenges there as well too, because of how focus of, for example, Homeland Security is focused mostly on municipals, hospitals, schools, things like that. And between WyoCAN and Cyber Wyoming, we're focusing more on business industry, which frankly is experiencing some pretty robust challenges as well too. People don't realize the honeypot of information like a physician's office would be. And, you know, in many cases, you know, they just don't have the types of resources available. So, so really that was what we wanted to do today, was just answer any questions that you might have had about previous presented documents, and help you in any way we can just to make those administrative changes, which is mostly what it is, that just updates our existing legal structure to the current times. Attacks have changed, the methodology of attacks have changed, the targets of attacks have changed. And cybersecurity is just one of those areas that we need to, every 2 or 3 sessions, you know, we need to, you know, take a look back and make sure what we passed previously is updated and still relevant. So with that, I stand for questions.
Committee members, any questions for the director? Mr. Co-Chairman, please.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Director Lupien, one of the things we were, I think, kind of interesting hearing at this meeting, as we reviewed the information that was previously provided, was maybe a little bit of background on some of the suggestions, and as well as perhaps a prioritization of, you know, are any of these particularly critical where we should be sure to get them on the next agenda, or trying to think through the recommendations on how we should proceed with them, recognizing, you know, there are quite a few, and some of them are nuanced and some of them might be more direct. So I don't know, do you have a copy with you of?
I didn't bring it up with me. It's I have it in my bag. I apologize.
If I hand this to you, would you be able to maybe make some suggestions there?
Yeah, and since, well, my co-chairs, you know, bringing that to a director, that's kind of my thought as well. Is, you know, when I look through this, I think there's just some good suggestions for sure, but as one always must do in the legislature, you kind of have to prioritize what it is that you want and what's most important. Because I think there's a lot here, and part of me kind of thinks that maybe we should tee this up for the 25 agenda, and, you know, kind of get working group, more collaboration, more discussion on this. Because I mean, I think there's some really good ideas here, but if you could maybe expand on that a little bit.
Yeah,
that'd be great.
Yeah, happy to. Identity theft, which is high on the list, I think is something that's becoming increasingly, you know, more important. And so I would certainly prioritize that. Consumer protection, I think, is always an important issue from a legislative standpoint. So the article, Chapter 12, Article 1 is somewhere that I would certainly prioritize as well too. I think if you start there, if there were 2 that I would deal with immediately, I would probably deal with those 2 first. Computer crimes is broken into a number of different areas. Intellectual property tends to be an important area that I think we need to deal with as well too. So really, I think if you focus your efforts there, I think it wouldn't be a terribly hard, you know, heavy lift. And I think we, you know, the residents of Wyoming would see some real benefit. So that's where I would start my recommendations. And you know, we can certainly, you know, if you want additional resources, we can put a small team together that could be available. You know, and I could use both students and professionals from WyoCan and Cyber Wyoming. And, you know, if you're looking for some, you know, assistance there to help kind of, you know, plow the field, I'm more than willing to make this an experiential program and, you know, assist you guys as well too.
Yeah, Mr. Co-Chairman, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And on that approach, you know, as we kind of contemplate maybe for the next interim, one of the things obviously with identity theft, with consumer protection, there's laying out some suggestions in these documents about what some of the flaws are, but one of the easiest paths, and I think these areas are ripe for it, are where states have already gone to the trouble of drafting better quality legislation in these areas than we might have. And that's obviously how states mostly
Right.
upgrade their statutes, is by looking around, figuring out who has the best, start with some amendments that follow that, and then perhaps improve upon it.
Mr. Chair, that was part of what we
Okay.
did as a result of generating this report as well, too, is we did kind of look at what the best of class was. And we also did look at what our legislative environment was and try to marry the two of those together. We were hoping to kind of lay out a roadmap as much as we possibly could, because we understand cybersecurity is not something that, everybody is necessarily expert in. And so our goal was to create, basically here are the statutes that would be impacted.
Mhm.
And here are some, fairly, easy, relatively, here are some changes that could be proposed based on those statutes. We're really not looking or expecting any, new legislation. I think it's really just, every couple of cycles, let's take a look at where we're vulnerable, where has technology changed, where has the nature of the attacks changed, and just kind of, reconnect and renexus those points. So, and we're, absolutely willing to do that, now and into perpetuity to help you as much as we can. We are going to be working with our School of Engineering, and we've had some faculty changes with cybersecurity and CEDAR. So we are looking to rebuild that. We have a number of grad students that are still working off of grants that we have. So we have resources that can work with you on this.
Mr. Co-Chairman. And I think the director raises a good point where it absolutely makes sense to periodically update this for the reasons we kind of discussed. Obviously I'm not going to be here, but I do think that this would be a great thing to put at probably one of the top interim topics once the legislature adjourns in March of 25, mid-March. At least that's kind of my gut reaction, but Mr. Co-Chairman, I'd be happy to hear your thoughts as well.
Mr. Co-Chairman, I think modernizing these, we had the Digital Information Privacy Task Force, which worked on a lot of these topics, and that was probably 8 years ago now, maybe 9 years ago. And as the director noted, these things change far more rapidly than legislative cycles kind of capable of keeping up with it. So going back in and looking for best practices makes a lot of sense. And then some areas weren't tackled at any point, honestly, and could just be updated from perhaps language from the 80s. Where we're talking about facsimiles. Magnetic storage.
Disconnect your acoustic coupler if you suspect again, through the chair, yes, I do think that, it is important for us to focus on these changes. But, is it so emergent that, we can't do it in the interim instead of the January session? I defer to you all on that. I do know our committee is standing by and ready to help you as you want us to. So if you want something, you're ready for the interim, ready for this coming January, we can provide you with whatever you need. And in addition to this, we have redlined a lot of already, for you all. Just let us know how we can be a resource for you. We understand that this is not necessarily, where you're from, and it tends to be a little bit wonky, but that's why we've got the WildCan committee standing by.
Sure. Director, if I might put you on pause for just a sec. Representative Yen, I know this talks about the bill that you sponsored way back in 2020. I know it's hard to remember what went on then, but off the top of your head, do you recall what was the discussion in committee on that? On that one? Sorry to put you on the spot.
No, Mr. Chairman, I would have to think about that. It has been a while, and 2020 was a year where I forget a lot of things.
Things were indeed. Mr. Co-Chairman, anything else you'd like to add?
No, Mr. Chairman, I do think we just probably add this to our interim topic consideration list, and I'd ask Clarissa to make sure that this gets incorporated into that. And we can identify perhaps within it a few topics and put together some bills that will hopefully end up looking like cleanup, which is always nice when
Sure.
they look like cleanup.
Mr. Chairman, through the chair,
Director, please go ahead.
we could probably provide a couple of prioritizations to you. One of them could be, a prioritization on impact. If you could only do one or two of them, what would be the one or two that you would absolutely necessarily do? And, we can send that through LSO. And maybe one or two of those could catch, the session, bless you. The other thing we can do too is we could prioritize based on how heavy a lift it might be. Often, maybe we can, knock off 5 or 6 easy ones that will have a significant impact on consumer protection and cyber safety for Wyoming that, could be grouped into a single bill and handled, fairly easily. So I will circle with the committee, both of them, Cyber Wyoming and WyoCan. And we can provide both of those prioritizations and then, leave it to the discretion of the committee, to see which approach is probably going to be, either more practical or more appropriate for the next coming session and the interim following.
Mr. Chairman?
Ms. Co-Chairman. please.
Yeah, and I think that's a good approach, if we came up conceptually with, and I'm being a little arbitrary, 3 bills and what they might contain that would do the most. Just from an organizational standpoint, if you and the committees work together to organize those and the objectives so that they were, again, consistent with our one topic rule, all the things that you're
Sure.
familiar with. And then we could use those as a starting point. I think that would be a handy approach, and then it's a good interim assignment. And typically when we're doing cleanup work, that's legislation that takes some work, but the legislature's usually receptive to modernization of that. So hopefully it wouldn't be too heavy of a lift to get that through the
And
chambers.
through the chair, absolutely,
please.
Mr. Chairman, we don't want to ever add to your workload. Our, main priorities are, safety and security, around this topic. So, we are at your disposal.
Great.
Thank you, Director. Appreciate the update. Well, like I said, we'll make sure that's at the top of the queue next spring. Let's look at our agenda here. Looks like we're now ahead of schedule.
Very good.
Supposed to have
Any public comment on that?
Yeah, of course, Mr. Co-Chair. Thank you for reminding me. Is there any comment on that topic from anybody in the room? Anybody online? Okay, we're gonna go ahead and close public comment. I guess because we're now definitely ahead of schedule. Was there any public comment that we had about anything we've talked about thus far this morning? It's good to see some familiar faces. Mr. Co-Chairman, you want to?
Well, we probably go into break.
Yeah, I'll just have a bit of a long break. So it's now 10:08. And we will resume our agenda with item number 5, which is Secretary of State's office at 10:45. So time to go get some coffee. And Representative Yate can go move his car. Exactly. Maybe it's towed, maybe it's not. Clarissa, are we live? Okay. We are back from our break again. This is always our strongest attendance, Mr. Chairman. I think
I
you
know, right?
personally arranged for that,
Absolutely.
which, can't complain. So we are on agenda item number 5, Secretary of State's office. We're going to talk about our digital ledger filing system. This has been, just for some of the folks in the room and online, a little bit of the kind of the background here. For 5 years now, 4 or 5 years, Mr. Co-Chairman, we've talked about how there's some real serious potential out there if we can really bring our filing systems to the cutting edge. And not to get too down into the weeds, but we've had a lot of discussion. I think if we could do that, we could really supercharge, our and continue on that promise of being business friendly. But there's been a lot of discussion between the legislature, the executive branch, the governor's office, et cetera. And so I think this idea here that you see before you, this draft bill was really an idea that between the center here and Director Lupien of, hey, well, if we can kind of put our heads together, we might be able to chart a path forward to champion this cutting edge filing system for businesses. And so that's kind of at a very high level of why this is here. First, obviously, maybe David, you could do it from there if you'd like, Mr. Hopkinson, or up here. It's up to you, but maybe just walk the committee through the bill a little bit, if that's okay.
Then, Mr. Chairman, would your preference be kind of a full walkthrough or just through the changes from the committee that we saw last time? What's your preference?
Yeah, I guess for the sake of time, maybe just the changes, if that's okay, or if you're comfortable with that.
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman. David Hopkinson with the Legislative Service Office, walking through 25 LSO 86. So the bill is primarily, the same as the committee saw last time, with a few changes that I'll go through here. First is on page 2, line 10, provides that subject to subsection C, or excuse me, that's actually page 2, line 2. And subsection C is new language, and that begins on page 3. And that provides, this was to clarify that the secretary did not have to implement this. This was more just for the development. It provides that the Secretary of State may allow for the testing and implementation of the filing system developed pursuant to this act at the Secretary's discretion, and nothing in this act shall require the Secretary of State to implement the filing system developed pursuant to this act. So that was pursuant to the discussion from last time, just added to make it clear that this is really just for the development. There was just some grammatical changes, but the next bigger change that we'll see is on page, in the definition, on page 4, in lines 15 through 18, the required filings. There's added language at the end there that limits what the filings are to Title 17, 34.1, 34, and 40. And again, that was just based on the discussion from last meeting.
Mr. Hopkinson, just for the committee's edification for the folks in the room, could you go through and which titles are referring to which sections of state statute?
Certainly. So Title 17, that's basically business filings, corporations, that sort of thing. Title 34.1 is the UCC. Title 34 is property more broadly. And then Title 40 is trade and commerce. So those were the kinds of filings that this would be focused on.
Thank you. Please proceed.
And then finally, there were some changes in the appropriation section on page 5, subsection B, language added there on lines 10 and 11, that this would be for developing the filing system required by this act. Just again, to kind of highlight that this is just for the development. And then it did add a new provision on lines 13, that the funds from the account would be distributed quarterly as they become available until the full amount appropriated under the subsection is distributed. And so those are the primary changes from the last version to this one, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Hopkinson. Mr. Co-Chairman, any comments?
No, it looks good. The
Okay.
changes that we asked for are all accounted for, and appreciate those updates.
Yeah, I think Mr. Co-Chairman, making sure we just say that we're just gonna allow for this, the sandbox, if you will, to test for this versus actually the going live out to the general public. Mr. Secretary, please. We welcome your comments.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate you having us here today. One note, we may be in and out here a little bit during the conversation. We just received notice that in our office that a white powder was opened in an envelope this morning. So we've been evacuated and we're responding to a security incident at the Wyoming Secretary of State's office. So just if you could excuse us a little bit, possibly when we're just responding to that incident, but the Highway Patrol is there and responding to the security incident. Thank you, Mr.
Secretary. Obviously that's a very serious incident, so please do what you must to handle it.
Thank you. Well, good morning, Co-Chairman and members of the committee. I'm Chuck Gray, the Wyoming Secretary of State. Today, I'm joined by Colin Crossman, the Director of our Business Division to our right, and Joe Rubino, our Policy Director and Counsel. With your permission, Mr. Chairman, I have a few broad points on 25 LSO 86, Working Draft .7 Digital Ledger Filing System Development, which has been reviewed by our office. Then I'm going to yield the rest of my time to Mr. Crossman, who may have some additional technical comments based on his review of the bill. And of course, we can answer any questions the committee may have. As 25 LSO 86 Working Draft .7 currently stands, our office is required to work with the University of Wyoming to develop a blockchain filing system for documents filed with our office pursuant to Title 17, Title 34.1, Title 34, or Title 40. There are several issues with the bill as it is currently drafted that is informing my opposition to the bill. First, I think this bill is still far too broad. The required filings on page 4, lines 15 through 18, still encompass any filing with our compliance division, which is also in Title 17 of the Wyoming statutes dealing with securities regulation. Even though the bill eliminates some other filings, including elections, lobbyists, and filings through our Administrative Services Division, the bill as it currently reads is much broader than affecting the existing filings in our Business Division. I also want to stress, and Mr. Crossman can elaborate, that our existing system is not API compatible to the level of complexity required by the mandates of this bill. We have an enterprise-grade system. It has been developed and optimized for years to accommodate our filings. The bill contemplates entirely tearing the system down and rebuilding from scratch, in addition to all of the other filings our office process to accomplish the mandates of this bill. As I testified in July, I still believe in the appropriation in this bill is not realistic, and I don't want to get into the position where we start a project, sink $2 million or $300,000 or whatever the appropriation the committee's considering at this point, and not even able to begin to consider the mandates in the bill. This bill contemplates an appropriation of $2 million to the university for the development of this system for an entire overhaul of our office's filing systems. By way of background, my predecessor had previously worked with our existing vendor to upgrade our business filing system, and what became a request of a little over $3 million from the legislature for a natural progression of our existing filing system. And I want to emphasize that that had been negotiated down. I negotiated that down about $1 million, about 30%, 25%. And it was rejected by the Appropriations Committee. I question the methodology behind where this $2 million figure came from, how it was calculated for this project, which will require tearing down and completely rebuilding our filing system, which I might also add is again been awarded as a top 3 filing system in the nation. And that leads into the next point, which is I believe this is bad policy. Mr. Chairman, I want to speak to the policy this sets and the need for this bill. Given our office's track record of providing fast and friendly service to our customers, as evidenced by our market growth in filings, I've remained concerned that mandating our existing filing system to be overhauled and placed on the blockchain is not sound policy. We do good work in the Secretary of State's office. We provide our services in a way that people like and a way that makes our customers feel comfortable. I have serious reservations about the policy ramifications, return on investment, and feasibility of what this bill would entail, and I'd be remiss if I didn't voice these now. And, one of the things I would add here is that I think jeopardizing, the great work we've done, the fact we're top 3 in the nation, the fact that we're number 2 in the nation in business filings. We always say we have 75% of the work of Delaware with 10% of the staff. Is not sound policy. I think the next step before we'd ever get to this is to do the upgrade that we requested, which would be required anyway to do the things that this bill is requiring us to do, and that would be the first step. But to have the blockchain center spend $2 million on this rather than the actual upgrade to the system that handles what people need and that other states have done and that we're frankly falling behind on because of that appropriation not being granted earlier this year, I think would be an error. I'm going to go ahead and with all of our concerns regarding the bill's draft's breadth, the funding, the concerns with the policy of this bill, I again am opposed to it, and I question the need or return on investment for this bill without some sort of path forward. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Mr. Crossman, who can walk through anything I may have missed, or we can take any questions. Thank you.
Before Mr. Crossman proceeds, any questions? Sure, we'll have many, but maybe, I guess kind of, Mr. Kaufman, now, maybe we'll let Mr. Crossman kind of weigh in and we can go from there. Mr. Crossman, please.
I don't, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't have anything much to add. I'm going to, in the interest of time and what happened this morning, I'm going to just reiterate and incorporate my objections from the last meeting and stress that the single most important aspect is that our current system is fundamentally incompatible as it stands right now with the kinds of improvements that this would take. So while there's work that could be done, this is not, our current system isn't really set up to incorporate that kind of thing. Sorry, I'm just a little bit distracted with.
Understandable, Mr. Crossman. Committee members? Mr. Co-Chairman?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Gray, so at our last meeting, we asked what it would take really to get this to work as we understood it for your objections, and that's why we incorporated language which made it clear that it didn't have to be implemented, but would be a joint project, and the idea then being that it would show enough potential value that it would be adopted, right? So that's obviously the new language on paragraph C, bottom of page 3 onto page 4, which indicates that while it's required that the Secretary of State's office work with the university to develop it, there is no requirement for using it. And again, I believe that was at your request from the July meeting. And then we did have some discussion about how much money, and I think our suggestion at that point was kind of all right, well, if 2 million is not the right amount, what is the right amount? So with that in mind, I think the select committee in good faith has tried to work with you to put together a piece of legislation you would be comfortable with and addressed those interests. My question is really what has changed in the intervening months. It seemed that there was some willingness for a partnership, and now it sounds like it's steadfast opposition under all circumstances, regardless. What's different, and what did we fail to address?
Mr. Secretary?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I think that my opposition, I think I've been pretty clear on it. I mean, I presented a suggestion for a path forward. If the committee chose to do it, to pare it back a little bit, but still the last point I made at the last meeting, and that I think I kind of after the windup moved into in these comments, is that I just view it as bad policy to do this before the upgrade itself, which other states have already done. And I think that it would make sense for us to do the other thing first. And also, I think the expenditure is not a wise use of funds. And I go back to the debate on that upgrade, which was that
Mr.
the
Chairman,
Appropriations Committee really scoffed at.
we remember that.
Yeah,
Mr.
thank you.
Chairman.
Go.
What was the value of the update? What was the appropriation request?
Mr. Secretary.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. It was my predecessor that actually researched that and had it at $4 million. And I negotiated that down to 3 million. We got it down 25%.
Okay, so Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Co-Chairman.
3 million is the current ask for the upgrade. That's basically what the Secretary of State's
Mr. Secretary.
office is looking for. Is that correct?
Well, Mr. Chairman, that was our ask in the 2024 budget session.
Okay, are you still
Mr. Chairman.
pursuing that $3 million?
Mr. Chairman, no, the legislature has made it clear they
So you
don't.
no longer desire an upgrade for the system?
Mr. Chairman, we do, but the Appropriations Committee has made it very clear that they don't have any interest in it. So
Okay.
we
Mr. Chairman,
submitted a position increase. We have 10% of the staff of Delaware with 75% of the work. And so we're very efficient in the Wyoming Secretary of State's office.
Mr. Co-Chairman.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman. So I need to understand a little bit, why would we do the upgrade if we did this? I mean, to me, you've laid out that the two systems are incompatible. That was your testimony. That was Mr. Crossman's testimony. If we were going to create an API structured system, which again, we know from previous testimony on this committee is an achievable outcome. We know that international vendors have already done the bulk of this work for other states, and then the projects were put on hold even 5 years ago. This took place. So we know that it's an achievable solution. In fact, we have vendors in this room right now that can do the solution. Why would we upgrade the existing system for $3 million prior to replacing that system with a better system? Would that not be a waste of public funding?
Mr. Secretary.
Well, Mr. Chairman, we believe that the upgrade is the way to go. I mean, other states have done it and they're frankly starting to go ahead of us because Pennsylvania did the upgrade and they were ranked #1 in the nation. We still have our top 3 ranking, but I understand that your blockchain priorities and there's a lot of good stuff in this space, but the people of Wyoming want a system that has been tested, that is fully compatible with them being able to get their filings done, that allows them to do amendments online. Senator Rothfuss, this is basic. And it has been rejected time and time again by this Appropriations Committee.
Yeah,
And so that's why I think
Mr.
it's.
Chairman, Secretary,
Thank
we're
you.
not the Appropriations Committee.
Yeah.
We didn't reject that. We're focused on a project that we've been working on for 5 years, dating back 2 predecessors, actually, of yours. And have had testimony about how significantly it would effectively revolutionize the ability to file amendments and to authoritatively validate transactions with businesses, with new businesses. I mean, this is the value we're bringing. I think you're familiar with that from prior discussions. I guess I'm failing to understand which of the existing feature set would not be readily and easily available through the upgrade that we're discussing building out in cooperation with the University of Wyoming. So which features can a blockchain not achieve?
Mr. Secretary.
Well, Mr. Chairman, this system that has been built by Tecuity, which is the vendor we currently use, you're actually our first customer, has been tested in other states. The GUI, the user interface, is very strong. It has been user tested. In fact, it's rated the #1 in the nation. And that track record of strong customer service, of having that interface that people want, is something that I think is very important, and having a vendor there that has built that system specifically around business filings, rather than the system you want, which is throwing everything out, or the system that is contemplated in this bill, which is throwing everything out and rebuilding it from scratch. But we think that the better route to go is this upgrade, and then maybe adding on some of these other things that you want to do. But that upgrade is a key priority of our office.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Co-Chairman.
Again, I guess I'm failing to understand what can't be done where both interests are met. I mean, the idea that there's anything unique about a GUI as an overlay of the back end, which is all of the transactions, you can literally take the GUI and put it on top of any data structure. Mr. Crossman can tell you this as well. You know, this is not a challenge. So I'm struggling to understand how the Secretary of State's office can't have the fanciest, prettiest GUI that anybody could achieve over the top of a robust Web3 enabled API driven blockchain. It's almost like, oh, well, let's say most of the major successful corporations have managed to integrate robust GUIs with modernized database platforms underneath, whether they're Web3 enabled or not. So what am I missing here that is unique and nuanced about your office's data structure and architecture and needs that precludes an integration of a Web3 enabled foundation with whatever GUI you want?
Mr. Secretary.
Mr. Chairman, tearing our entire system down is a huge gamble that we're just uncomfortable engaging with and doing. And so that's, I think, part of our opposition to this bill.
Mr. Chairman, would
Mr.
there be any
Co-Chairman.
problem having them in parallel? Because again, I think it would be very easy to set this up such that there was parallel operation, particularly in a beta phase or something along those lines where nothing was teared down within the Secretary of State's office, but you still had this feature set, which was being, through automation, through synergy, validated and registered on blockchain. In other words, and again, I think Mr. Crossman could probably address this. He has a substantial experience in this space. Oftentimes, that's how you deploy a next generation client, is to run them in parallel so that you don't have any risk of alienating existing users, but your power users for a year or two might have access to the upgraded feature set, run them in tandem, and then at some point you would potentially phase that out. So I guess I'd ask you what is the downside to that, and maybe we can get Mr. Crossman to analyze that since he's built some of these types of projects in the past.
Mr. Secretary.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just don't think it would be a good policy to have a parallel sort of system running at the same time. I think we need to get this upgrade done. I think that, in my opinion, that's, I think, the correct policy. Now, if you want to run some other feasibility study and pour money into that, and that's the proposal now, I guess that's maybe how government works sometimes. But I think that getting it right in terms of the prioritization and the ordering, I want to be clear on what I think the right way to do it being the head of the office in question.
Sure.
And so I certainly think this bill as it currently reads, especially as it originally read, is not the way to go. Now, feasibility study running in concert or whatever, I mean, I don't think it's good policy. Is it something you could do in answer to your question? Yes. But I don't think it's good policy.
And Mr. Chairman, I know you've got some questions
Mr.
too,
Co-Chairman,
but
please go
one
ahead.
more. I'm honestly struggling to understand why it's not good policy, except for the fact that it's clear that you now oppose it. But as we contemplate it, bad policy to me seems like adding one feature set for $3 million and then coming back and replacing it with a different system later for a couple of $1 million. That's the only thing I see here that is clearly and apparently bad policy. In other words, continuing down a path that, even if it looks nice, is an obsolete path that is not business friendly, that does not enable growth in the state of Wyoming. Because again, it's the underlying architecture that is truly what's important in enabling. The GUI is ease of use, but your larger companies, they don't want to come in to the GUI and click send 3,000 times in a day when they're filing UCC filings. That's one of the reasons why they end up working with others. And again, with Delaware, while Delaware doesn't directly allow through their system API filings, they have subsidiary third-party vendors that provide that type of service. And that's how you get your 1,000 UCC filings in a day, where presumably we would have a point and click solution available for that, or realistically, somebody would bring the tall stack of paper in and hand it to all of you. So when we're contemplating what is good policy, would it not be modernizing to the cutting edge of what industry wants at this point in time?
Mr. Secretary?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I would argue that it is cutting edge what we want to do. I mean, it's been rated #1 in the nation. At Pennsylvania implemented, it was rated #1 in the nation by users. And I think we see this very differently in terms of the ordering. I think certainly we can pursue the upgrade as we had envisioned it, and at the same time, study the add-ons that I think you want to do. I think you want to sort of have them going on at the same time tangentially, which to me is not the way to do it. I think our office could have that. And I understand maybe you don't think we're going to do it right, or I'm not going to follow through, but look, I will tell you that if we do an upgrade, we will certainly consider all of these add-ons. We've talked about it, but I think having two things going on at the same time, one in our office, one with the blockchain center, is not good policy. I mean, we'd reach out to them anyway. And so that I think that's one of the ways that we disagree. But this system that we're looking at is rated #1 in the nation.
Mr. Chairman, a couple more things and I'll let you. I know
Mr.
you've got some
Co-Chairman,
questions.
please go ahead.
Well, I know it's #1 in the nation, but it doesn't have a new feature set. It sounds like it's just a prettier and easier interface, which is very different from what we're looking for. And there's nothing wrong with a good GUI. That's what I used to program when I was younger. I programmed GUIs. It was an important thing. But at the end of the day, the underlying architecture was what was important always. I just made things pretty so that they were easy to use. And pretty and easy to use is always handy. But I guess here's the question. Joint Appropriations Committee is not advocating for what you're interested in. I don't know who else is advocating. We had an opportunity here to partner where we have an interest, and that interest is not your $3 million upgrade. That interest is a Web3 enabled system. It seemed, however, that there was a synergy here where we could put together our interests of a Web3 enabled platform with your interests of an upgraded platform, come together, work together, and try and get the appropriation. What I'm hearing, however, is that you don't want to part in that partnership. You want to go your own way, and you're not looking for support from the Select Committee. Am I hearing that correctly?
Mr. Secretary?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I think definitely you've heard that incorrectly. I think that my vision for how we move forward and work together is a little bit different, in that I think that we should pursue the upgrade together and then look at add-ons around some of the things you want to do within our office. And certainly we can bring in the Center for Blockchain Innovation to help with that. But I don't think you need a bill to do that. I think that can be done within an appropriation for the upgrade, and talking about add-ons within the upgrade and possibly a feasibility study within that appropriation. But I don't think having separate processes sets us up for success, which is what this bill has always envisioned is done. So certainly want to work with everybody. I've always been about working to bring forward good policy for the people of Wyoming. I think we do have a difference in opinion on how to get there. And I think this bill is not the right path, but there's certainly things we can do to work together. And I think that that's the path forward.
Go ahead, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chairman. Mr. Secretary, you said that you feel that this bill is bad policy, but ultimately the legislature gets to say the final word on what is and is not good policy.
Well, Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Secretary, I'm not finished. That said, you say that this bill is not it. We kind of talked about the context of, we're trying to build this next generation, very innovative filing system, but this is not it. I appreciate that's your opinion, but if this isn't it, what is it? I appreciate you want to upgrade your current system, but in terms of taking this need by the market to the next level, what is that option if it's not this?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate that question. And I think the way we move forward is that we look at an upgrade that includes discussions of add-ons around what the committee is interested in. And I think that that's sort of a path forward, in my opinion. And certainly the legislature can sets policy, but ultimately I'm weighing in our capacity and being able to testify before the committee and being the head of the agency, ultimately Secretary of State's office.
Mr. Secretary, I certainly appreciate that, but I mean, unless I've missed something, it doesn't sound like you've, outside of these conversations with this committee, it doesn't sound like you've done that, or am I remiss in my understanding?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I would disagree with you on that. We put forward the upgrade with the intent, and we had talked about this in the office, that we were going to bring forward as part of that things on these add-ons for what the blockchain committee is wanting to do. And we discussed that numerous meetings in our office when we did that appropriation. It wasn't discussed super in the committee meeting because it wasn't in the appropriation itself, but that's always been the vision here in us trying to get good policy for the people of Wyoming at the cheapest cost, not having two parallel processes. We can do this by working together and having it all rolled into one process and being able to do this upgrade and also have the things that the blockchain committee is looking at.
Appreciate that, Mr. Secretary. I mean, again, I think we look at this in the big picture. The upgrades you're talking about, let's go back to my favorite quote by Henry Ford. If I had asked people what they wanted, I'd have given them a faster horse. Well, the upgrades you're talking about, no doubt they'll be helpful, they'll be impactful, and they'll do all that stuff, but it's a faster horse. We are talking about an upgrade here that really takes this to the next level. So that's kind of the big picture of what we're talking about. But to your point you just made about some of the internal deliberations, obviously I'm not privy to the internal discussion. So I appreciate your sharing that. Would it be reasonable to believe that you intend to incorporate some of these things you've talked about in your budget request from the upcoming session in the supplementary budget? Does the office intend to do that, Mr. Secretary?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I mean, because the Appropriations Committee rejected our request at the last, just earlier this year, we decided not to move forward with that in our request to the Appropriations Committee because it's very clear they had no interest in it. It got 0 votes. It wasn't even moved. So certainly we were very prepared in that 24 session and engaged in good faith with that committee, but that's the way it played out.
And Mr. Secretary, to borrow your own words, I appreciate that, but it feels like we're kind of in this, going in the circle of defeatism, to borrow some of the language I know you've used, where it's like, sure, there are differences of opinion and concerns, but at the end of the day, we are where we are. We're exactly where we were 4 years ago today. Again, we've got folks in this room who are pretty knowledgeable on these particular matters, but my message to them is help us help you, right? I mean, it's kind of this, we have to take that initiative here. And if this bill isn't it, I'm certainly interested to hear what it is, but if you're not intending to include those in these types of amendments in your budget requests, it kind of lends me to think that we're stuck where we are, and that's not going to change. And absent any other alternative, at least as at this moment, it's the intention of this select committee to pursue these options because we have to do something, right? So,
well,
Mr. Secretary, if you'd like to respond, please.
Mr. Chairman, the governor's office has made us clear that the supplemental budget is for emergencies only. And so that's the policy. And also the Appropriations Committee has made that clear that they want the supplemental budget to be for emergencies only. We brought forward in good faith this upgrade that had been researched across 3 administrations. And I had actually negotiated down $1 million, 25%. It was just met with complete opposition. The reality is we do have an emergency right now. We need staff now. We have 10% of the staff of Delaware, and we do 75% of the work. So I had to make a strategic decision on what to bring before the Appropriations Committee, and we made the decision to move forward with staff because they did not move forward with the technology upgrade earlier in the year that could have alleviated some of the demand concerns that some of the concerns that we have in being able to meet our 15-day statutory deadline, which we will continue to meet 100%. But we had to decide what priorities to set, and also we were given sort of a diktat that's the way the supplemental budget will go. So we made a decision in line with those recommendations and those priorities.
So, Mr. Secretary, because it is talked about only emergencies only, you do intend to make some of these requests in the supplemental budget because you have designated them an emergency? Is that a fair understanding?
Well, Mr. Chairman, it isn't designated as an emergency in like the federal sense or the state, but we view it as something that needs to be addressed, which is the staffing concern. And the upgrade would take probably 24 months. So at this point, with where we're at in terms of the demand we're seeing, the need for us to meet that 15-day statutory deadline, we've decided to ask for the positions in this appropriation.
So, Mr. Secretary, do you intend in the 26th general session to make the amendments contemplating this bill as part of your budget request? Or do you intend to do so?
Mr. Chairman, certainly the upgrade and if you want us to have some provision about supplements and add-ons, Christmas tree ornaments, I would be happy to discuss that with you. And I think the 26 budget would be the appropriate time for that.
So one more, Mr. Co-Chairman. So would you welcome a bill directing session law to ensure that your 26 request must include the type of amendments that we're contemplating in this bill draft?
Mr. Chairman, I don't think I'd welcome a direction. I think ultimately the executive branch needs to make those calls and its request. I think the legislature demanding is a little bit of an intrusion upon the separation of powers, but certainly would want to engage with you and have the intent that we move forward together to get to that space.
Mr. Secretary, at the end of the day, it's just, we got to do something. And without hard commitments, that's where we're going to be in 2 years is right back. But I'm digressing at this point. Please, Mr. Co-Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Getting back to the point that you made a couple of times with my co-chairman about add-ons and Christmas tree ornaments for the overall software package. I pulled up the website for the SOS Enterprise, which is the package that you're looking at. And again, to me, it looks like user interface improvements, but it's not about data architecture. And I guess I'm struggling to understand how you can have an add-on where the data architecture shift is more significant than the graphical user interface and then call that an add-on. I mean, typically your data architecture is your foundation. You build the data architecture, you build the enterprise use. That's the system architecture. And then the GUIs that go on top of it that provide access will be at a couple of levels. One could be an enterprise access, which would be API, which I don't see here, but maybe it's here. And the other is that straightforward GUI, which is, if their website's any sign, it looks like it's going to be great. But I guess I'm missing how you can add one Christmas tree ornament on and all of a sudden you're Web3 enabled, when we've literally been talking about this for 6 years as a foundational shift that no state in the country has ever done. And it would once again put the state in an incredible leadership position. No country has done it. So what am I missing about the powers and capacities of the Tecuity system that would allow them to flip a switch and enable a full Web3 architecture?
Mr. Secretary or
Well,
Mr. Crossman, I don't know. You want to?
And Mr. Chairman, certainly, I think that could be rolled in as part of that discussion. I think in terms of the prioritization, we need to get this upgrade done first. Data architecture, maybe we need a feasibility study to see if people actually want this, because I'll be honest, outside of this committee and people attached to the blockchain infrastructure, I haven't heard one mom and pop customer tell me, I want a blockchain integrated system. I haven't heard that once. Okay. It's always been around this committee. And look, and I'm speaking on Wednesday at the blockchain conference. I voted for a lot of these bills. Some of them at the end got a little too much for me, but I voted for a lot of the blockchain infrastructure that was created. I mean, I think Representative Lindholm's back there. If not, he's outside, I think. I mean, the 2018 bill that he did. I'm all for innovation. That's what I believe is a conservative, dynamic conservatism that believes in innovation. But one of the questions I have on this is why? And I think that's something that you could roll into the overall upgrade, which is the thing that we really do need. I do think our system, I don't want to be negative. I mean, we're okay. We're still top 3 in the nation, but we are going to begin to fall behind. And so this is really about an ordering of priorities for me in terms of one of the few revenue centers that our state has, which is these business filings and what our office, does in terms of prioritization. So
Right.
that's one of the things where I'm coming
Mr.
from.
Chairman, on the why
Mr.
side of
Chairman.
things, and again, I'm still really struggling because I feel like we've had these conversations. We've certainly had the testimony, but you might not have watched all of the testimony associated with this over the years. Because again, we've been talking about this for 5 or 6 years. We know that state of Delaware does over $1 billion on filings, and a lot of those are due to UCC filings and other things that they have built in, and the larger companies need their automated systems to do that. And as you've pointed out, we do have extraordinary revenue in the state of Wyoming as the second or third, wherever we're at any given time, in terms of corporate filings, but that still is orders of magnitude lower, right? I believe we're in the, I'll say $50 million range, compared with the $1 billion range, and those numbers might not be perfect. But we're still looking at a 20-fold potential growth scenario. When we investigated this 5 or 6 years ago, Mr. Co-Chairman, you were there for this discussion, and some of the other members were. That market bridge isn't based on graphical user interface. It's based on the feature set of being able to service the largest enterprises that are doing the 1,000 UCC forms a day. So what is the value? What is the difference? The aspiration is, as I heard my co-chairman appropriately talk about, getting a faster horse, is what the general public wants, because the general public that needs an API-driven Web3-enabled UCC filing system isn't here. I think that's a big part of why we're not getting those calls, because they're in Delaware and they're probably calling Delaware. But we do know that that enablement would put us in a unique position where a prettier user interface sounds like we would be second or third to the table for the prettier user interface. And then I assume we would be beholden to upgrades and whatever else this company that we would be signing contracts would want. And we'd basically have to scale for parity. So why do we want to be second or third place when we could be unique in first place and be the first Web3 enabled enterprise level API driven system in the world? Give me a business case on why, watching from second place is better than global leader, where this select committee, and I think you're aware of this, we tend to shoot for global leader.
Well, Mr. Chairman, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I definitely want to be the global leader, and I think we are a global leader. And I think we've done a great job in making Wyoming #2 in the nation. I think one of the things, the number one reason that is preventing us from being a global leader is the fact that our system needs this basic upgrade, which we requested in the 2024 session. And unfortunately, it was rejected. We have received a lot of feedback from our customers on this. We went through a process where we had a public meeting, where we had a test on this. And I think we just disagree on how what the priorities should be, what the list of priorities should be. And look, I think we have a good track record in identifying these priorities. I mean, we said that the digital asset registry, we really doubted that there was going to be a lot of demand on that. And you had a different standpoint. We stood up the system. According to what the legislature asked for, we've gotten 3 registrations now in almost a year. Is it 3? Oh, excuse me, 1 up to 10. Okay, still pretty low. I mean, and we were hearing that it was going to be thousands. And so I think we were on the spot on predicting the demand on that. And I think in terms of our thoughts on, I view it very passionately that in terms of what the public wants, that the ordering, I mean, I think that's fine, this industrial data architecture change and being able to integrate that into the upgrade, that's great. But to put the cart before the horse and do this first is, I think, a big error.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I think we're just going to have to disagree, because everything I know about information technology says that the architecture, that's the key. You build that first. You put a GUI on top of it once you've got the architecture right. And I don't think there's any sensible our system architecture, enterprise architect that would do otherwise, like we need to upgrade the GUI and then we'll figure out what's underneath it. That's not an approach to building enterprises that I've heard of, but we
Yeah,
can
but
stop
Mr.
there,
Chairman, can I add one thing to that?
Mr. Secretary?
Thank you.
I'm feeling generous. Go.
Yeah, well, thank you. Really appreciate your generosity. I think that, my issue partially too is just knowing the Appropriations Committee, they wouldn't accept the $3 million upgrade. So putting $2 million into this when it's going to require the upgrade anyway, I'd rather get the upgrade first, try to integrate some of these things on data architecture into it. But I think that in terms of what we've received from our customers, the feedback we've received from Wyoming citizens, that system interface and the fact that we're falling, we're top 3 in the nation, but the other state that has this is number 1 in the nation, and we want to get that number 1 spot. That's what I really aspire to be, and I think that's where we disagree a little bit.
Mr. Secretary, I would caution you to not impugn the intent, certainly of future appropriations committees. As you know, we just went through a primary, lots of new members are coming in. And so we just want to avoid impugning the intent. Who knows? I mean, they might be much more amenable than the previous appropriations than our committee number 2. So just, for the future,
Yeah.
we'll see what happens during the session.
Just to clarify, Mr. Chairman,
Please.
I don't think I was impugning the intent. I think the reality is, as I have often been called, people call me cheap, and I've been there. I know they have a tough job. They have every single agency trying to give a request. So I'm just trying to get the priorities, the list of priorities, and this system upgrade is the number 1 priority. And I know the blockchain committee really wants to do that, but that's all I was saying is I think that they want to keep this to a reasonable dollar sum, and I want to bring them a package that we can get done at the lowest cost. And so certainly didn't mean to impugn anybody's integrity, but I think that the way this bill is written, it's going to end up being a lot more expensive, where we could go through another path that I kind of proposed that would be a lot less of a cost. And I know as the Appropriations Committee, that's what they want. They're a stickler on those dollars. And I certainly don't think that's impugning anybody's integrity. I think it's great. And I'm all for cutting spending and budget reduction.
Well, Mr. Secretary, we'll certainly see how the incoming members feel about this during the session. The co-chairman and I have kind of broken protocol a little bit by diving in first, but of course we want to allow our committee to weigh in. Representative Yin, please go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, Mr. Secretary. I appreciate you being here as always. I want to divide the bill into 2 parts, right? So we've talked about the blockchain part, which is the underlying database and where the data is actually stored. But the other part of the bill, and that we've had in previous bills from blockchain, is the API part, where businesses could interface with the API and rather than having to load a website and then type all the things in manually and then go through that web form. I'm curious on your thoughts on just the API part, whether that's possible with our existing vendor, and what is stopping us from doing that. Your predecessors did have resistance to the API idea in the past, but I'm interested in hearing just the API only. What's stopping us from having that?
Mr. Secretary?
Yeah, I'll turn this over to Mr. Crossman, who talked a little bit about it, and he can talk a little bit about it.
Mr. Crossman?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The current system would not support the API integration as described. However, the upgrade that was previously discussed at length would do a couple of things, one of which would be to bring all filings into the online space. In order, yes, there was a back and forth about graphical user interfaces, and while accurate, you of course build your underlying structures first, and then you put the graphics on, the interface on top of it. In order to enable a new online filing, all of that infrastructure would have to be built out. So the contemplation of a new system that would allow all filings to be done online would necessarily include the creation of APIs that would enable that to be done. The question then becomes whether or not those could be made public APIs. I do not know what the upgrade would allow. That was discussed. I made strong intent that we would want that. So yes, an open API where I call them enterprise customers would be able to access the system is contemplated, at least in part, in that upgrade. Yes, I think that fundamentally the future would require some form of directly accessible API in some way.
Representative Yen, follow up?
Mr. Chairman, thank you, Mr. Crossman. So was an API discussed? Have you discussed with vendors on the feasibility of an API through that upgrade requirement? I don't know what the upgrade has entailed. I didn't follow the appropriations budget requests or the thoughts behind whether you're making an appropriations request for them. What were those discussions taking place about the feasibility of adding a public API or an enterprise secured API with those vendors?
Mr. Crossman?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There were discussions about having the API opened up. We did not go all the way because obviously the appropriations ended. However, it was not a, the discussions were left me with the sense that possibility existed, not that it was out of the question. And it was more a choice on our end and may require additional work, may not, but the key was to get the information infrastructure such that everything could be accessed through by computers through the web, whereas right now only a select number of things can be done. One of the important components of having any API infrastructure, one thing we do not have right now, is the ability to authenticate users. So that is a functional infrastructure security change that is absolutely necessary to create any API. That simply having that additional aspect in the new system is something that we don't have right now, that is a condition precedent to having an API.
Representative Yen, follow up? Seeing none. Okay. Any other committee members? Any questions for the secretary or for staff? Senator Nethercott, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a question concerning the API capability with the current vendor. Did the proposal with the current vendor in 2024 or in 2023, I guess, contemplate that open API where you could authenticate the user? Was that part of that appropriation request? Was it part of that contract? And where could I see evidence of that in the documents?
Mr. Crossman or Mr. Secretary?
We didn't have an appropriation, so we didn't have a contract.
Follow up,
Senator
Mr.
Nethercott, follow up? Please go ahead.
It's my understanding that the request for the appropriation was with the #1 vendor in the country, and it had not been put out for an RFP, and that you were negotiating the contract because the previous secretary had a $4 million offer. You negotiated it down for $3 million. So in those negotiations, under those contract provisions with the sole source vendor, did it include an API provision for authentication of users?
Mr. Chairman, I'd have to go back. It came up verbally many times, and certainly to get the costs down, I was trying to get the basics done, and because we got that down 25%. So adding on new things was not something necessarily in a negotiation I was trying to do. And still, the Appropriations Committee said it was way too expensive, even though we would have had a lot lower rate than other states. And we have that actually, Pennsylvania, I think, ended up being over $7 million. So we were going to get basically a 40% or 60% discount, 40% of the cost. But it was brought up verbally. And what I was saying was that on the back end, that being able to add that on as part of that upgrade was part of what we were contemplating.
Follow up, Mr. Chairman? Yeah, thank you.
Please proceed.
Has the Secretary of State's office issued any kind of RFP concerning its vendor?
Mr. Secretary?
Mr. Chairman, because we don't have an appropriation, we have not done an RFP.
Follow up?
No, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you, Senator Endicott. Well, any other questions for the Secretary of State's office before we hear from other folks? Or Mr. Secretary, please go
Got
ahead.
one thing, Chairman Western. If you go back, Chairman Western, to that Appropriations Committee hearing, I very clearly made clear that if the Appropriations Committee, when making the appropriation, would like us to have an RFP, I said that would be great. And so obviously we didn't have an appropriation, so there was no RFP. You have to have an appropriation to proceed in that way. We didn't have the funds encumbered.
Duly noted, Mr. Secretary. Mr. Crossman, anything else you wanted to add on before we bring some other folks up here we've got on the schedule?
Yes, thank
Mr.
you.
Crossman?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to be clear, while I'm not speaking to terms of any contract that or whatever, the system as proposed and understood included a authentication and login system. That is a condition precedent to having an API. The API component is what was discussed verbally and with the vendor, but the login component was part and parcel of the upgrade. And so the two things are not completely inseparable. I mean, you have to have one to have, you have to have the authentication component to have an API, but you don't need a public facing API if you have an authentication component, if that makes sense.
Any questions for Mr. Crossman? Seeing none. Thank you very much, the Secretary and your staff. We appreciate your time. Obviously, they might have some follow-up questions, so, you know, just stick around, I think. Yeah, next we've got, don't you know? Mr. Steve Lupian, please. Committee welcomes any comments or questions or concerns you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Committee. Again, I'm Steve Lupian. I'm the Director of the Center for Blockchain and Digital Innovation here at the University of Wyoming. I am absolutely not going to weigh in on the policy aspects of this discussion. The university or the CBDI, let me correct that. The CBDI has met with the Secretary and the Secretary's staff, and we're certainly not unsympathetic to their position, but as we look at this as the way the bill was originally written, and this has been the scope of most of our discussions with the Secretary's office, had really two provisions. One was we're going to explore what options are available out there with various stakeholders that may interface with the current vendor they have or the vendor they have now, understand the capabilities and make recommendations on how to move forward so that we would maintain a best-in-class system and incorporate the Web 3.0 capabilities that this committee is talking about. The second part of that was that there was appropriation in there to actually make that happen as well too. And so when the bill was pared down following the last meeting to make it less of a mandate and more of a, may implement, we at the CBDI looked at it as, well, now what the role we would take would be a little bit more of a investigative and developing a roadmap that could explore how could we imagine how this system works. Using the core system we have now, can we incorporate some of the Web 3.0 capabilities either through the core vendor or through other stakeholders? Or would the upgrade be necessary in order to incorporate some of these capabilities? Or is it, financially feasible or in the state's best interest to do a rip and replace? And we viewed our role at the CBDI as kind of taking a holistic approach to this and saying, okay, based on current technology, based on vendors that are available today, what would be in the best interest of the state and the stakeholders using this system? And so, and I've heard a lot of that kind of in the debate that I've just witnessed, which is there's a lot of unknowns as to how, is there a way to take our existing core system and perhaps not do the upgrade and build in these capabilities? I don't know that answer yet. I don't know if we can, build in API capabilities in the core system as it exists today and give us those Web 3.0, at a savings to the state. So at the CBDI, we've been looking at this bill and saying, really, what we think our role moving forward is going to be is kind of be, that I don't want to say third party because we are part of the state and the state is our constituent here. But could we be a fresh set of eyes looking at this and saying, okay, we understand blockchain technology. We have a very good lay of who the stakeholders in this space are. And as the co-chair mentioned, several of them are even sitting in this room right now that, quite frankly, might have a might have a very strong position on how we could accomplish exactly what the Secretary's office wants, which is how do we be good stewards of resources for the state and maintain our lead, and also the committee here that wants to look at, how do we, is there an opportunity here for Wyoming to leap, forward by incorporating this type of technology. So our position at the CBDI is we stand by, and we have the right team that can look at this and make recommendations we believe that would be in the best interest of all the parties. And the way the bill is written today, I think gets a little closer to that approach. I certainly do think there is some debate as to whether, if we're going to do a phase one roadmap, is the dollar amount that's in this bill appropriate or not? I think that is certainly open to discuss. Originally, that dollar amount was to explore and implement. If we're going to explore, then I think there's certainly some room there, where, we would certainly not need that size appropriation. And it might be palatable to people if that number is adjusted down. But what I heard in the debate, which was, I think, lively spirited and certainly worthwhile, was two different positions. One is, we've got a good system, let's not mess with it. And versus, hey, here's an opportunity for us to jump best in class. I think the role of the university in this particular process is, can we develop a roadmap that satisfies both needs? And I think we have the team that we can do that. They're here in the room. And we will certainly honor the both the spirit and the will of both this committee and the legislature in how we would potentially move forward. So with that, I stand open for some questions.
Thank you very much, Director. Committee members, Mr. Co-Chairman, please go ahead.
Thanks. Director Lupien, my inclination, if we're going to run legislation and try and get the funding to do this, is really to have sufficient funding to create it as well. Even if we don't compel the Secretary of State's office to implement it, but get to the point where it's ready to be implemented fully. I've seen a lot of roadmaps. And
understood. And through the chair, Mr. Co-Chairman, I agree to some extent. It then comes to the question, what's the point?
Yeah.
And I agree with you. I mean, certainly we could, we wouldn't expend, the entire $2 million in this bill in phase one, and we would develop the roadmap. And I certainly see your position, which is, and we've heard it in the debate here where, there's a needed upgrade that there was never the appropriation, so it never moved forward. So I would certainly support that as well too, which is, if we're going to explore, at your discretion, if you think it makes sense to also appropriate the funding to make it happen, then, I understand that rationale and we would support that. Our first approach would be, let's look at, I hate using this term, but let's reimagine how the Secretary of State system would look in the future, using all the potential, stakeholders that are available to
Right.
us and come up with a plan.
Yes, perfect. Okay. Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I'm good.
Mr. Co-Chairman, real quick, I guess anything from the committee members? See any, do we have anything online? Any hands raised? I don't think so. Director, perhaps I'm kind of reinventing why we brought UW in the first place, but my understanding is that part of it's just the brainstorming capabilities that you guys do have, right? Is to kind of think outside the box, but part of it's also just a technical capacity as well. Let's say this got passed into law as worded, which that's a heck of an accomplishment. Do you have the ability with folks within the center, within UW, to pull this off from a technical aspect, or familiar enough with APIs, or to what extent would you have to go to outside consultants and vendors to help fulfill that component of this kind of whole puzzle?
And Mr. Chair, I think, do we have the capability? Absolutely. The university has full stack engineers. We have, grad and post-grad students that have unbelievable capabilities, but we also have access to vendors and stakeholders that do this as well too. And I don't know if I'm in a position right now to say, this particular component, we can do the programming at the university ourselves, or a vendor could be brought in that has that capability. That would be what our, kind of our phase one, study is all about, and why we would bring some fresh eyes on it. I mean, generally speaking, APIs are not a technology that, quite frankly, is unknown and very difficult to program. Obviously, we would want to do it in a way that's safe and sound and secure, but do I have confidence that this project as a whole, would the resources of the CBDI and others at the university be able to accomplish it? Yes.
So, Director, it sounds like to at least some extent, you will have to go to outside third parties to pull this off.
Well, through the chair, yes, Mr. Chairman, I would suspect so. If nothing else, to work with the vendor that we currently have, and writing new enterprise software is a heavy lift for anybody, including large vendors, and so I envision that the CBDI's role, besides laying out the roadmap, would be making sure the right partners and the right capabilities are brought to the project. And that is actually something that, we've done several times and been successful with. And some of the testimony I gave this morning is exactly that role that we serve.
Sure. Well, any further questions? I mean, I think, Mr. Chairman, if we kind of look at the schedule a little bit, we're kind of running up against the clock. My thought is this, Mr. Chairman. We've still got our commercial registered agent working group update, plus public comment. My thought is maybe if we can get through those two, break, come back, work the bill after lunch, or Ms. Co-Chairman, what are you thinking? Okay.
Sounds good.
We might be able to squeeze through all that here.
Yeah, I think that sounds
We
good.
wanna-
We
I
can
know we
take
wanna
action
give
after
our-
lunch.
Our subcommittee chair, our working group chair, at least some time to walk us through their
Sounds good.
deliberations. Thank you very much, Director. So up next is our commercial registered agent working group. Now I know Representative Singh, Mr. Pope, and Brendan, of course, you guys met multiple times. Maybe just kind of walk us through some of the deliberations, the tone and tenor. I mean, I know we're a little bit up against the clock, but I know you guys put in a lot of time, and we want to make sure you bring the committee up to speed on where you're at. So please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Chairman Rothfuss, rest of the committee. We've been working on let me gather my thoughts. Sorry. So the Commercial Registered Agent Working Group has been working to create a legal framework that positions Wyoming as a leader in blockchain and digital identity law. This includes providing clarity and security for cryptographic transactions while promoting innovation and trust in digital commerce. Our efforts have resulted in 3 interrelated bills: the Cryptographic Signatures Act, the Cryptographic Commercial Registered Agents Act, and the Cryptographic Identifiers, Seals, and Ascriptions Act. Together, these bills tackle the legal challenges surrounding cryptographic technology, digital identities, and blockchain transactions. The key problems addressed by the bill for the Cryptographic Signatures Act, the problem is that current laws do not adequately recognize cryptographic signatures or provide a clear process for verification. This bill provides defines cryptographic signatures as 3-part signatures, ensuring message authentication, data integrity, and non-repudiation. It introduces computational verification as a legally recognized method, providing security and validation for digital transactions. The Cryptographic Commercial Registered Agents Act, the problem is that there's no accountability structure for managing cryptographic identities or transaction, and this bill establishes cryptographic commercial registered agents responsible for managing cryptographic seals, 0x addresses, and digital identities. It ensures that acts taken through digital identities are properly attributed and legally recognized. And then the final one is a Cryptographic Identifier, Seals, and Ascriptions Act. The problem is that there are no standardized method exists for registering and managing cryptographic identities or seals, and this act introduces legal recognition for cryptographic identities, public-private identifiers, and series seals, creating a structured system for digital identity management and registration. And so these 3 bills that we're really working on, they're not ready for prime time quite yet, but these are tying in directly into this integration of Web3 technologies directly with the Secretary of State. And so I know that David Pope and Brendan Meyer have some comments as well.
Thank you very much for that overview, Representative Singh. Mr. Maher, did you want to go first, or Mr. Pope, or which one do you like to weigh in first? Let's go. Actually,
David Pope is going to do an intro, and then he's going to go back to me, and then I'm going to go back to him, and we're going to do a lot of interactive quick stuff here to smooth out all of the issues regarding, as well, the Secretary of State's comments earlier. Thank you. Go ahead.
Mr. Pope, take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Really what we're doing is we're continuing to extend the groundwork for proof of ownership, proof of identity, proof of location, and governing law. And this is on a very broad basis. But as this committee knows, blockchain is an anywhere and everywhere technology, and as such, we need this because they're really, these concepts are not adequately explained or defined in most places, and we can, if we can do this, it speaks to some of the co-chairmans and your comments earlier on about how if we can be the first in a lot of these areas, we can. Wyoming can continue to be a place where innovators can come to create and to have certainty of treatment. The state treasury will benefit because the new registrations. I know that Mr. Secretary had a couple of comments about the digital asset registration, but I think that's more an issue of how many people know about it, and so that's a marketing issue more than it is a kind of a whether or not we should be doing this kind of thing. And the courts themselves will benefit from the clarified guidance. So what we're looking at in a slight bit more detail is we're looking at adding Chapter 32 and a Chapter 33 to Title 40. Which would be the Cryptographic Signatures Act, and then the Cryptographic Names, Addresses, Identifiers, Seals, and Ascriptions Act, and then Chapter 33 to Title 17, which would be the Cryptographic Commercial Registered Agents Act. Certainly, as Representative Singh noted, we are not ready for prime time, but I really do think that we're close enough to where we can begin working with the LSO and with other interested parties and with this select committee to begin drafting those bills should we get the go ahead here today. So that's really all I had. Mr. Marr has a lot of in-depth detail on all of this, and I'm very, very happy to turn it over to him now.
Mr. Maher?
Oh, great. Let me pop that message off there. Great. Yeah, I guess I'm supposed to do the record for the record thing. So my name is Brendan Marr. I'm an MIT Media Laboratory alumnus from 1998, and I've been involved in the Digital Identity Act, the Registered Digital Assets Act, the DAO.
Brendan, I think we might have lost you. This is your moment to shine and you froze. Brendan froze. Unfreeze. Maybe we'll give another 30 seconds or so. Clarissa, what are we seeing on your end?
Those shows must be in there. We can pick up after lunch.
Yeah.
It's 12 o'clock. That was convenient timing.
Maybe, Mr. Chairman, I think maybe just go into public comment real quick for a couple minutes or.
See if there's any.
Yeah, I would imagine there will be. Let's open it up to public comment and we'll bring Brendan back in and let him finish. I know they put a lot of work into that, so we want to make sure he gets to present their full findings.
He's back and he's moving.
Brendan, are you back? Okay,
Yeah.
please proceed.
Uh-oh.
I think you're on mute.
How about now?
We got you loud and clear.
Okay, great. All right. So first and foremost, I want to make note that I will be addressing the Secretary of State's comments. I will smooth things over. I believe that we can work things out. I definitely concur with many of the things that the Secretary of State's office was saying. We have basically a roadmap. We have the 3 acts that David Pope presented. The important part and idea here is that, first and foremost, that this is about a lot of registrations. It is not just about entities; it's about identity. There's a component about this regarding seals and attestations. So to walk you through an idea of what we have here, we currently have a full, near complete first draft of what could be a Cryptographic Signatures Act, and we have those 2 additional acts, which we have basically a good idea what would go into them. The challenges that we came up with, and this is how we kind of figured out how to organize this, is that we certainly can't do all this at once, right? And I will mention that I definitely do believe that the Secretary of State wanting to upgrade their system, I do believe that is actually a good thing to do. I mean, they need that as an underlying basis for their architecture. And what we are proposing as a roadmap is something that can be layered in on top of that in parallel. And I'll get more to that later. But I want to just walk you through why we broke these things into these 3 different acts, why I needed to come up with this breakdown. So we start off with the Digital Identity Act. The Digital Identity Act was very important in providing information about demonstration of principal authority and how you establish digital identity. It basically means that anybody who uses digital media can have a digital identity. This includes social media. It does not specifically include the constructs of cryptographic signatures, right? So what we're actually doing at a high level is we're saying, okay, we have this stuff called digital identity, which is very broad, but there's this very specific part of digital identity in which you can use cryptographic signatures to express your digital identity. And when you use cryptographic signatures, there are very deep legal implications of that, because there's the whole aspect of the idea of some people who believe that code is law or law is code, and it's simply not the case, right? Because we always have facts and circumstances, and these things apply. So what we needed to do is build up a mechanism where we are able to establish digital identity beyond just texting some stuff on social media, where that digital identity is actually based on cryptographic signatures. And this is very important because when in order to have identity, right, we're talking about enabling identity and how we actually do this. And being able to enable identity has to be related in the Wyoming jurisdiction as being tied back to something that Wyoming has created when you're talking about businesses, registered businesses, or associations, which are made by notice. And potentially, if we ever get around to doing e-residency for non-residents of Wyoming, that will become very important. And by the way, when I say billions, I actually do mean billions. I think once we get all of this ironed out, and we're hearing right now all these things that I've been testifying in the past about artificial intelligence, and we know we're going to be hearing about deep fakes and everything in the next session. At a certain point, having the ability to bind truth to people's online stuff in all manner, not just intellectual property, in the strictest business sense, but basically everything, becomes very, very important. And what we are building up is the infrastructure to actually be able to do this. All right. So we have this idea of being able to have digital identity just across the board, and then have digital identity which is made by an action through cryptographic signing, through a cryptographic seal. The important part about a cryptographic seal in this construct here is that it is digital identity. It is also related to personal identifiable information. So we have two things. We have this digital seal, which is two sides of the same coin, right? So one side of that digital seal is issued and cryptographically signed by the Secretary of State through these special cryptographic registered agents. And then the other side is stuff that people and organizations can add to those seals as personally identifiable information. These things which are ascriptions. You ascribe a seal, you ascribe something that you cryptographically sign, and you ascribe it to a seal. And that's the idea here. And those two things together collectively are these public and private identifiers. This is really important. The public part and the private part is very, very important, because we cannot do all of this at once, right? In order to make an architecture where we have these you can think of them as registrations by protocol, right? Not by API, by protocol. You need to have this idea of identity, right? But most importantly, and this got into the earlier foundational work that we were doing in laying the grounds for all this, which is that we believe that if we get this stuff right, particularly on the private identifier piece, which I've testified and we've testified many times through many years here, that if we get the private identifier part right with zero knowledge proofs and other types of mechanisms, that we will be able to do this in a way in which it's all private. I will take questions. I have more to say, and the reason I did not get to the point why this is why what we're doing here is most important in terms of the legal aspects, and I do want to address that. But please, any questions?
Thank you, Brennan. Obviously, we got to be sensitive. We are up against the clock a little bit, but Mr. Co-Chairman or the committee members, any questions thus far for Mr. Mar? Mr. Pope, I see your hand raised. Do you want to weigh in?
Yeah,
Make
please.
a comment?
Just real quickly, one of the things that I did want to bring up is that it may seem that our working group had a little bit of mission creep here because we were originally assigned just to look at the creating the Cryptographic Commercial Registered Agent Act. But what we found in our discussions is that you can't have that unless you have the cryptographic names, addresses, and identifiers fully defined. And then you can't have that unless you have the Cryptographic Signatures Act. So all of this stuff, as Mr. Marr alluded to, builds on each other and requires addressing in kind of in sequence here. And so that thus his comments as well about how, not all of this we may not be able to accomplish all of this at once, but it all has to build on each other and you have to start in the right place.
Sure. Mr. Pope, I can appreciate that. I think that's a pretty valid point. Mr. Marr, I want to try to get us out to lunch by 12:15. Maybe if you could really just hammer down on kind of the big takeaways for you guys, and knowing that we can resume some of this stuff next spring on more interim work. I think this could be potentially a great topic, but maybe take the next couple of minutes and on the big takeaways that you guys deliberated and concluded in your working group.
Yes, the big takeaways is that having a Cryptographic Signatures Act where we have one place for the definitions of all these things is very important, and it needs to be, and we already have it. It has to be based in the idea that we have cryptographic verification, and that cryptographic verification is something where anything that we do with any of these larger frameworks regarding DIDs or zero knowledge proofs, that they're all rooted in facts and circumstances. I mean, I could read you the statute language. I have it in front of me, the potential draft for that. But getting back to the Secretary of State's comments earlier, I definitely want to address those. Maybe we could do that after lunch.
Sorry, Mr. Morris, conferring with my co-chair. Can you repeat that one more time?
Yeah. The Cryptographic Signatures Act is an act of definitions. So there's no cost to it. There's no implementation. Right? When I was working through this, it was extremely important to do it in such a way in which it could be a layered approach. So it is, it's my hope that, maybe we have it almost done to the point where we very well might even be able to get it completely done. Just the Cryptographic Signatures Act, which is only definitions. By the way, it does not mention anything about seals or any of this other stuff. That's just not in the Cryptographic Signatures Act, because we can't put it on. We can't put it in. We can't put a reference into these other acts where they don't exist yet. So the Cryptographic Signatures Act is really definitions and the salient language, which is that it defines a computational proof as being a computational proof. Should mean that it's a proof of a computation based on cryptographic verification, rather than the consideration of facts and circumstances determined from the context of surrounding circumstances at the time of the cryptographic signature creation, execution, adoption, everything that is in 4021-109. So we just make explicit that cryptographic signing and all of these other higher level frameworks that will come into play in terms of DIDs and zero knowledge proofs, all of those other frameworks are all rooted in cryptographic signatures and facts and circumstances apply. That's the nutshell of what the Digital Signatures Act is about. It makes no reference to the seals. I mean, we have an internal reference that is reserved for these in what we currently have, but those will be taken out. If we get anything put forward by the end of this calendar year, if that's possible. Because we need to be able to layer these things in. Did that answer your question?
Mr. Co-Chairman, you want to?
Yeah, Mr. Co-Chairman, I think that's exactly what we should do is, see when the working group gets that put together. If it's not too comprehensive, we could potentially get that drafted. That would be an individual bill draft at that point in time. We won't take action through the committee, but if it is straightforward and relatively simple, we could potentially do that bill for this legislative session, and then presumably work the other two bills in the interim that would layer on top of it. So I think that's an appropriate strategy for us to take on if that sounds good, Representative Singh.
Representative Singh, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. That sounds appropriate.
Love a good being voluntold. Mr. Hopkinson, real quick, I mean, are you seeing any alarm bells or red flags there, or are you tracking?
Mr. Chairman, certainly I haven't personally seen those documents yet, but assuming they're relatively straightforward and we get direction in the ask, I don't see any reason why we couldn't have something prepared.
Yeah, Mr. Co-Chairman, I think that makes sense, right? I mean, the working group covered a lot of ground, a lot of concepts, and that means a lot of just stuff we have to put into a bill. And I think, walking before we run is the right approach. And so I think having that Cryptographic Signatures Act is step one, and focus on that. So it's 12:15. Mr. Co-Chairman, I'm inclined to say we wrap up public comment when we come back, or
well,
what do you think?
I wanted to, if I may, adjust. Sorry.
1 second, Mr. Mara, 1 second.
Hang on for just a sec, Brendan.
I think we should see if there's anybody that can't come back after lunch would be the only thing that we do,
So
and then wrap up after.
I'll tell you what, Brendan, we'll just give you a quick 2 minutes, if that's okay. Is that, so we got some.
Yeah, sure. Okay.
folks.
I wanted to address the Secretary of State's office, and I wanted to say, in the prior discussion, for the record, okay, and everyone in the blockchain committee knows that I'm in your camp, okay. But I want you to know for the record that I concur with the Secretary of State's office, and I 100% believe that the draft for LSO what is it 25 LSO 0086 is the wrong path forward. I do not believe in any way, shape, or form that not, or I should say, any way, shape, or form that that if we do not have that that proposed legislation, that we cannot move forward. We can. I think it is critical, and this is where I agree with the Secretary of State's office, that them having a base system and an upgrade is, I do believe that's the right thing to do, because what we're doing here will be done in parallel, and it needs to be done in parallel in a layered fashion. And most likely it'll be done in a layered fashion where we will layer in first getting working DUNAs and potentially other things. We can't do everything at once, and the Secretary of State's office is, we're dealing with many different things, including the registration, business filing registrations, and they actually need that base level to exist and to be up to date, and we can layer in on top of that, these cryptographic primitives for identity and other things. But I think we can work this all out, and it all works together.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Mr. Marr. Appreciate that. So my initial thought was we come back and do public testimony after lunch, but I know that there's folks in the room who have schedules, raise your hand if you wanted to testify on the specific issue or topic. Okay, so obviously we've got folks. Can you do that after lunch, or do you need to, for scheduling reasons, do it right now?
You're flying.
Okay, all right, well, everybody else we'll get to you after lunch, but we got some folks that want to do it now. So Mr. Mueller, please, obviously we know who you are, but you know the protocol, and let's hear what you have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate the flexibility. My name's Scott Mueller. I'm one of the organizers of the American Crypto Fed DAO. I'm here with Xiaoming Zhou, who is another one of the organizers. American Crypto Fed DAO is the first decentralized autonomous organization launched legally in the United States under Wyoming law. That happened July 1st, 2021. We were the very first. I am thrilled to announce today that we will be issuing our governance tokens within the state of Wyoming, intrastate issuance, this November. So that's the plan. We see that we've overcome all obstacles to that launch. But in order that others don't face the similar issues that we've had to deal with in these 3 years towards getting that launch, we do have a suggestion for an amendment to statute in order to handle any requests for clarity. Joe?
Thank you, Chairman. My name is Xiaomeng Zhou, co-organizer of Crypto Fed. We have submitted a written testimony. I hope you have it in front of you on your desk. We have a small proposed legislation. Please look at page 2, paragraph 2. It is a short paragraph. Chairman, can Scott read this paragraph for me?
Please proceed.
Thank you, Chair. And this is our petition. In order to make both the Wyoming Decentralized Autonomous Organization Supplement and Wyoming Decentralized Unincorporated Nonprofit Association Act functional, CryptoFed petitions the Select Committee again to consider adding a paragraph to Wyoming Statute 17-4-605D of the Wyoming Uniform Securities Act, similar to the following proposed paragraph. If the Secretary of State declines to answer questions sought by a decentralized autonomous organization or a decentralized unincorporated nonprofit association, the declination is a determination that the Secretary of State will not institute a proceeding or an action against the decentralized autonomous organization or the decentralized unincorporated nonprofit association for engaging in the specific activities raised by the questions. So effectively, ask and if there's an answer.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Chairman. So Secretary Gray just told me about 1 hour ago, they will not answer our question. They will not issue non-action letter. Director Grossman also told me 1 hour ago, they had a different opinion about our tokens, but refused to tell us what it is. I don't believe the government should hide any policy opinions behind the scene and then later go after the citizen. So we believe those uncertainties should be removed by the legislature or by the Secretary of State office. And the Secretary Gray also suggests us to talk to AG. But my understanding is AG has nothing to do with individual ordinary citizen. They do not have the service window for us to talk to. So does not mean the litigation will come. We have deep concern when the government do not provide clarity about what violate or what does not violate. We submit our questions again and again multiple times, but the government just keeps silent and clearly tell us they do not answer our questions. So that is not a fair notice. It violates the due process law of Wyoming Constitution and the U.S. Due Process Law Constitution 14th Amendment. So I hope this legislature make that small changes to the statute Scott just read. It's not that simple. It's not that difficult. It's simple. It benefits us, benefits the Secretary of State office, and benefit everybody. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much for that testimony. We can appreciate that you guys are certainly in a predicament. Committee members, any questions for American Crypto Fed? Or is there any questions online? No. Mr. Mueller, please.
Chairman, if I'd just like to make another point.
Proceed.
The default is not regulation here. Okay, we aren't being told that we're doing anything illegal. Okay, no one can tell us that our actions are illegal. Okay, if they could tell us that it was illegal, that'd be great. Then we could have an action to take so we could become legal. Okay. The default is not regulation. The default in America is freedom. Okay, we should have the freedom to act. Okay, that's what the Constitution all leads to. Okay, is the freedom to pursue your happiness, right? Okay, so that's where we're at. We just don't want to have something held over our heads that at some future point in time could be used to harm our DAO or another DAO. Okay, you have to have clarity.
Mr. Co-Chairman, please proceed.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Well, let me just start off by saying, the task of this select committee since the beginning has been regulate to enable, provide bright lines, provide clarity, provide an ecosystem and environment in the state of Wyoming where there isn't any doubt. What can we do? What can't we do? Let's color within the lines. And then honestly, if you end up coloring outside of the lines, having cooperation with our state agencies to ensure that, you get a little help. And instead of a punitive measure, you get some help. So I'm incredibly disheartened to hear this, and we'll invite the Secretary of State's office up, and maybe if now is not a good time, we can do it after lunch. But I do want to talk about this a little bit more, and I'll just note this isn't about just DAOs and DUNAs. If we have a circumstance where we have an agency in the state of Wyoming that is refusing to provide clarity when asked, then we need a lot more extensive action. And we can look into that, Mr. Co-Chairman, but let's
Mr. Co-Chairman, I would largely affirm those comments. I mean, look, if it's about, interstate, obviously that's in the hands of the SEC and Gary Gensler. I want to put on the record, not a huge fan of, but anyway, but interstate within the state of Wyoming, that is absolutely within our authority, within the domain of the Wyoming legislature and the executive branches, and their job, their responsibility to promulgate rules. And if the Secretary of State's office is not being forthcoming and whatever their concerns are, that's a problem. Because the Wyoming way is to regulate to enable, to provide a stable playing field, use the sideboards, get out there and do your thing. And if that is not happening because of government, that's a problem. So I think you're probably right, Mr. Secretary. I think, or Mr. Co-Chairman, I do want to keep an eye on the clock.
Yeah.
And I do want to allow the Secretary's office to address some of those concerns. Was there anything more that you wanted to add? Otherwise, my thought was let's break for lunch. Let's come back and.
Yeah, let's make sure that Secretary of State's going to be here after lunch.
Yeah.
Yeah, understandable. Okay, so you'll be here after lunch.
Mr. Crossman, you'll still be here though. Okay.
Great.
All right.
Thank you.
Let's give him a crack at the mic when we get back from lunch. It's 12:30 now. Hour 15, Mr. Co-Chairman?
1:45.
Let's do 1:45. We'll jump back into public comment. I know we've got a busy, a great afternoon actually that I'm pretty excited about. So I want to be conscientious of the clock, but.
And Mr. Co-Chairman, I'll note, so on campus, the school, obviously university is underway at this point in time. So all of our food on campus is underway. The union has a number of restaurants available. on Prexy's pasture. So on the major quad is Rendezvous in Ross Hall. I think that's where we might want to go for lunch, but there are plenty of opportunities on campus and some on the other side of the campus as well.
Mr. Chairman, you're the local. We'll trust your word. All right.
Rendezvous.
We will adjourn for lunch and reconvene at 1:45 right here. Excellent.